All right, go ahead and start us up.
Can you hear us online?
Yeah, but there's a bit of an echo.
Now.
Oh,
Yeah. Still not great.
Okay, third computer's charm. How's that?
That's
Oh.
better.
Still not great.
Oh, we're lagging really bad, aren't we?
How's that?
Two-pager?
Oh, two-pager. It's like a vision.
Is that better, Tim?
Yeah, I'm not hearing myself now, which is great.
Well, that's just if we're zooming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not here myself.
No. Okay.
Testing. Can you hear us echo again?
Yeah.
Okay, no echo, thumbs up to yes, they can hear us. Wonderful. All right, well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Yes, Justin, you're pointing at me.
No, good. Go right ahead. Thank you. Take it away.
Great, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming here to talk about the Division 512 rulemaking. Couple of things to start off with. We're gonna talk through the agenda really quickly. I'll ask Justin to give an overview of the agenda itself, and then we'll hop into some introductions and then get to the meat of the meeting. But first and foremost, Justin, do you want to talk through what the agenda is officially, and then I'll propose a slight change.
Yeah, sounds good. So agenda just has one key item today. So this is what I would call an off-cycle meeting of the Groundwater Advisory Committee, where we decided at our June meeting to hold this separate meeting to talk just about the Division 512 proposed rules and to formulate the committee's advice to the commission on the rules. So that's the one thing on the agenda. Plus, every public meeting, I think by law, needs to have a public comment period. So we have that as well. That is slated to happen at the end of the meeting, as is usual. But maybe we want to change it.
Yeah, let's see. So I think I've gotten myself a little bit out of order here. We should do introductions first, and then we should talk about changing the agenda. But thank you, Justin, and thanks everybody for joining this special bonus edition of the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Quick round of introductions. We'll do the advisory committee members first, and then we'll pivot over to Water Resource Department staff. I'm Zach Freed, I'm a hydrologist with the Nature Conservancy. I'm based out of Bend, Oregon. But I'm excited to talk today about the Harney Basin. I've spent a lot of my time there in the past 10 years or so, both talking through collaborative voluntary solutions, but also talking about this rulemaking, which we began way back in April of 2023. So this is both a topic and a place that's near and dear to my heart. In fact, right after this meeting, I'll be driving all the way over to Harney County this afternoon. So anyway, that's me. And I'll pass it on.
Okay, I'm Dave Noble, farmer rancher from Bonanza, Oregon, irrigator, horsefly irrigation district board member. Well, interested.
Dave Smith, Hillsborough area, Cooper Mountain Critical Groundwater area. Farmer, domestic water user, grouchy old man.
Hi, Chris Bird, manager of the Well Construction Section, their department.
I'm Linda Ray, and I am the administrative specialist for Technical Services Division and support staff at GWAC.
And I'm Justin Iverson. I manage the groundwater section here at the department.
Awesome. Committee members who are online, go ahead and come off mute, introduce yourself.
I'm Ken Bentz. I live in beautiful Harney County. In fact, currently I'm there, irrigator, Also, have been on the RAC committee here for the last, what now seems like 10 or 15 years. So anyhow, we've been working through this issue now since 2014. I have some of the wells that are affected through this process. I'm out near Crane. So anyway, looking forward to today.
Thank you, Ken.
Hi, Stephen Patton, City of Milton Free Water Public Works Department. I'm a GWAC member.
Thank you, Stephen.
I believe that is it for the online members.
All right, great. Then department staff who are online, feel free to come off mute and introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Jason Spreet. I'm the East Region Manager out of Baker City for the department.
I'm Tim Seymour. I'm the Assistant Manager for the Groundwater section here at the department.
I'm Kelly Mines, Rules Coordinator and Policy Analysis for the department in Division 512.
Good morning. I'm Annette Lieb. I'm the Technical Services Division Administrator.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dark Boschman. I'm a hydrogeologist with the department.
And I think that's it as well. That's sufficient.
Wonderful. Yeah, y'all are fast. Appreciate that. All right. Well, committee members, let's briefly, I wanted to propose a slight adjustment to our agenda. Right now, we have public comments happening after the committee discusses, debates, and decides upon the advice to the commission, which, you know, that's how we've traditionally had the public comment appear on the agenda. That makes sense for most of our normal ongoing agenda items. In this case, it feels a little silly to potentially have public comments happen after the committee has already made a decision. It's sort of like installing a screen door on a submarine where you can do it, maybe you shouldn't. So I'm gonna propose that we have a kind of tightly succinct and brief public comment period after we hear from the department, after the presentation from the department, but before the committee debates and discusses what our advice to the commission will be. Are there is anybody opposed to that idea? That way we'll have two public comment periods, one short one before the committee discusses, and then a longer one as needed at the end of the agenda, which is how our agenda is currently set up. Any objections to that approach? All right, Ken or Stephen online, do you guys have any objections to that?
I do not. Makes perfect sense.
Makes sense to me as well.
Thank you both. Okay, so that's what we'll do then. We will have a brief public comment period after we hear from Jason, Tim, and Kelly, but before the committee discusses our advice. Let's see, we don't have to talk about meeting minutes or anything like that, since this is a bonus edition of the GWAC. So Justin, am I missing anything, or should we turn it on over to Jason, Tim, and Kelly to talk about the Division 512 rules?
How about I just add real quick onto the comment about the public comments in this venue. So this meeting is a groundwater advisory committee meeting. The public comments are kind of contained within this committee meeting. So the public comments are to the committee. If folks would like to make a public comment that's on the record for the Division 512 rules, they need to do that at a Division 512 public hearing, or they can send in written comments until, Kelly, help me out, August
7th at 5
August
p.m.
7th. Great. So between now and August 7th, written comments will be accepted. And sorry, Kelly, remind me, any other public comment meetings?
Yeah, so the next public hearings are actually next week, August 4th up in Seneca from, I believe, 5 to 7. And then August 5th, we are having two public hearings in Burns at the community center. I believe it's 10 to 12 is the first one. and then 5 to 7 is the next one.
Right, so just want to make sure we emphasize that those are the places where your comments will go into a summary of all public comments received on the rulemaking. And those public comments will then, be in the record for the Secretary of State's file, as well as provided in summary to the commission. So want to make that clear, and maybe we'll do that again before we take public comments real quick, but just do it up front. So if somebody wanted to get on the record and they didn't have to wait through the presentation to find out that wasn't going to be the case. So
perfect. We will reiterate that later as well, as when we talk about the timing and logistics of public comment. So in short, if you want to provide public comment today, you'll be providing that comment to the Groundwater Advisory Committee, but not to the commission, and not formally as public comment for Division 512. So do both if you want to.
yeah, that's true.
But don't assume that if you comment today during this meeting, that it will go to the commission. Great. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah. With that, we'll hand it over to Jason, Tim, and Kelly.
Thanks all. I'll start sharing here. Jason, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Tim. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate the committee allowing us some time here to talk a little bit about Division 512 today. Once again, I'm Jason Spreet. I'm the East Region Manager for Water Resources out of Baker City. So Harney County is in the East Region as part of the region here on the east side. Next slide, please. All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about the groundwater report for Division 512, and then we're also going to be talking about some of the strategies and tools that will be used or are proposed to be used as we implement 512 rules. And those tools include a classification, which we'll talk about, and then Tim will talk about the critical groundwater area, and then we'll switch back over and I'll talk a little bit about the serious water management problem area, or SWAMP as we tend to call it. And then Kelly will finish up today with next steps. So I will turn this over to Tim to talk a little bit about the groundwater report.
Thanks, Jason. As I said earlier, my name is Tim Seymour. I'm the Assistant Manager for the Groundwater section here at the department. And I'm going to talk through one of the required aspects of the Division 512 rulemaking and any proposed critical groundwater area. So Division 10 of the Oregon Water Resources Administrative Rules states that a report must be prepared, and that this report must include the following items, and we'll go through each of these items here in a moment. So first, it must identify the criteria that are met under ORS 537-730-1A through G. And that's basically what are the criteria that authorize the designation of a critical groundwater area. The report must identify and characterize the groundwater reservoir. So which ground, what area and what body of groundwater is being designated. And then it must also identify any corrective control measures that are being proposed that will lead to the correction of the problem that resulted in the designation. And then public comment on this report must also be accepted until the end of the comment period for the proposed rules. So this report is posted on our website. When we published it initially, we had presented to this body and sent out links as well. And comment is accepted on those rules through the same deadline as the Division 512 rules. So that's August 7th at 5 p.m. So that's basically the background about this report. And now let's dive into the three different components. So I'm going to start out with the criteria that have been met. And the first item is that groundwater levels have declined excessively. And that is defined in rule as greater than 50 feet of total decline from highest measured water levels. The second aspect there is that groundwater levels are excessively declining. So that means that, or that's defined as groundwater levels are declining at a rate of greater than 3 feet per year for at least 10 years. And then the last criteria here is that the available groundwater supply is being or is about to be overdrawn. And I want to point out that overdrawn is a really serious condition. As defined, overdrawn means that groundwater pumping exceeds recharge into the groundwater system. And so when this condition is met, that means that all recharge is being pumped and there is no groundwater recharge for any natural processes like discharge to streams or springs or to groundwater dependent ecosystems. And so, as I said, a very serious condition. So now let's talk about the different criteria and get into some of the details that the report provides. So when it comes to declined excessively, that's a greater than 50 feet of decline from highest known levels. We have a map here on the right-hand side, and there are red dots on that map that represent wells where we have data that shows that these wells have declined excessively. Now, I want to point out that in order to evaluate this criteria, we have to have historic water level measurements and current water level measurements in order to be able to compare. You have to have at least two measurements. So we believe there would be more wells on this map if we had more historic measurements or more current measurements for wells. Our data set is not comprehensive and complete among all wells within the basin. But we believe that this map and these wells on this map are representative of the groundwater system out there, and we have substantial declines. And then the last thing I want to point out here is that we expect more wells to reach this threshold within the next several years based on the current rates of decline. When we talk about excessively declining, the second criteria here that we've met, as I said, that's defined as a decline rate of at least 3 feet per year for at least 10 years. Again, we've got a map, the same spatial extent, and I should help orient you all. This is the Burns Hines area up here in the top left. Down here is Malheur Lake. And again, we have yellow dots here this time that show wells where we have identified a decline rate of at least 3 feet per year for at least 10 years. Again, our water level record is not comprehensive and complete across all wells in the basin. And we believe that these wells are representative of what's occurring within the system. And we expect more wells to cross this threshold in the next several years, again, based on the rates of decline in the wells where we have comprehensive measurement. And then the last criteria that I pointed out that we've crossed is overdrawn. So as part of the Harney Basin groundwater study, the USGS and WRD broke up the Harney Basin into 3 key regions. So the Harney Basin is the dark black line, dark black line at the top, and then it's the dark blue line around this bottom area here. And the 3 segments are colored in here. So there's the northern extent, the southern extent, and the western extent. And these are what were defined as water budget regions. So for making calculations about recharge versus discharge. And then the USGS also then broke the basin up into uplands and lowlands. And this yellow squiggly line that goes throughout the extent here, that is the dividing line between the uplands and the lowlands. So inside the yellow is the lowlands, outside the yellow is the uplands. So when we went to calculate overdrawn, we looked at specifically each water budget region as well as, and then inside the lowland areas, as that is where the vast majority of pumping occurs. And we believe it to be representative of this condition of overdrawn. So when we look at the northern water budget region, I've got two columns here. One is the difference between lowland recharge and pumping. So that's the actual definition of overdrawn. And then in the second column here, I've got the difference of lowland recharge and authorized use. So this is essentially how much paper water exists out there, not necessarily the actual quantity of, or the estimated quantity of pumpage. So for the Northern Water Budget region, we've identified that pumpage in that area exceeds recharge by about 2,700 acre feet per year. If we look at paper water comparatively, if all of the paper water were to be pumped, the authorized use, that pumping would exceed recharge by 96,000 acre feet. So we're by definition overdrawn, with the potential for being very severely overdrawn. In the Southern Water Budget region, recharge exceeds pumping by about 26,000 acre feet per year. And when you include all paper water, if all paper water were to be pumped in a year, recharge would still exceed pumping by about 10,000 acre feet. So by definition, not overdrawn there. And then the last water budget region, the western extent here, recharge exceeds pumping by about 4,500 acre feet per year. But if all paper water were to be pumped, pumping would exceed recharge by about 18,000 acre feet per year. So when we look at the three regions, we have the northern region, which is by definition overdrawn. We have the western water budget region, which we specify in the report as being about to be overdrawn because of the closeness to pumping exceeding recharge and the potential for that to occur with the current water rights. And then the southern water budget region is not overdrawn. So those are the three criteria that we have identified as being met within the groundwater report. And next, I want to get into identifying and characterizing the groundwater reservoir. So as we've discussed in past meetings, the Oregon Water Resources Department and the USGS participated in a collaborative study. It took about 6 years, and that study was to determine what the extent of the groundwater reservoir was and to really characterize that. And here I've got some key points that came out of that study. So first of all, we've got a map here on the right-hand side, and it shows the extent of the Harney Basin. This is the hydrologic basin, so surface water. And what was determined is that this is essentially one groundwater reservoir. There are no known barriers to flow within the entirety of this this area. The second thing that was identified is that though the groundwater is all connected, it occurs in different multiple connected geologic units. So think, rocks, the material that the water is stored in and moving through. And then depending on the different types of rocks, the groundwater behaves differently. So in permeable and porous material, water moves faster. In lower permeability, less porous material, water moves more slowly. And so the groundwater system behaves differently in different areas based on those geologic units. And then last, I want to point out that the rates and magnitudes of recharge and discharge vary based on location. So it isn't a uniform quantity of discharge across the basin or a uniform quantity of recharge across the basin. It varies based on where you are. And so that's how we defined the groundwater reservoir in the groundwater report. And then last, we identify the corrective controls that we could potentially propose in these rules. And the first corrective control we identified was that we believe we should close the area to further appropriation. So within the proposed critical groundwater area, we should prevent any future groundwater rights from being issued, and we should actually deny any applications that come in for groundwater rights. The second one we proposed is dispositioning any outstanding applications for permits. This is likely not an issue because the basin has been restrictively classified, or parts of the basin have been restrictively classified for long enough now that there aren't any outstanding new applications for permits. And then we also are proposing to determine the annual total permissible total withdrawal. That's the volume of pumping that can occur within the critical groundwater area. And then we also identified this provision, any one or more provisions making such additional requirements as are necessary to protect the public welfare, health, and safety in accordance with the intent, purposes, and requirements of, and these are the statutes for the Groundwater Act. And so these are the 4 corrective controls we identified in the groundwater report that we believe should be proposed in the Division 512 rules. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Jason to talk about the strategies and the tools proposed in these rules.
All right, thanks, Tim. Next slide, thank you. So some of the tools, as I mentioned early on, when we started the presentation that the department can use, and these are the department's regulatory tools. This does not include, any voluntary tools that may be out there as well. And I'll touch on those here in a second. So the tools that the department can use, include all 3 of these. The first being classification, and what classification does is it protects recharge by classifying the type and the amount of water that can be used in a basin. So it controls the future groundwater appropriation by limiting the type of use. So, for example, domestic use is exempt from needing a permit. The classification can limit things to only exempted uses or the area to specific uses. And I'll dig a little bit more into that also in a bit. And then the next one is the critical groundwater area, which gives the department the ability to actually reduce the existing use that's happening in the basin. So the department can control current groundwater use, which will help prevent further decline. And in those cases, we can regulate based on priority date or in other ways to reduce the existing use that's happening today. And then the final one here is the serious water management problem area, or as we call it, the SWAMPA. And what it does is it helps the department achieve more accountability through reporting of use. And what it does is requires measurement on all groundwater uses that require a water right, and also requires reporting of that use. So it achieves that accountability for any current use or any future groundwater uses that require a permit. Before I go on, sorry, I did want to talk a little bit about the voluntary actions that can also happen in addition to these tools. And those are, there's voluntary agreements can happen in the basin. So that would allow folks to get together and talk about how to use the quantity of water they're collectively entitled to. And it's similar to, if you're familiar with a rotation agreement, where folks take that water and use it within the boundaries of a voluntary agreement as they please. And so that's one voluntary action that can happen. Another voluntary action is CREP, or Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That is an incentive program partnering between the state and federal government that pays users to essentially retire their groundwater right or cancel their groundwater right in exchange for a payment that can be up to a 15-year payment per acre on that program. So there are a couple other voluntary tools that can be used as well. Next slide, please. So a classification, and we'll dig a little deeper into that tool. This is the classification boundary here. It goes up into the Seneca area and then down south of the lakes there into the Donner and Blitzen also. So you'll see this boundary as we go through this presentation a couple different times, but this is the classification boundary. Next slide, please. So the classification, as I said earlier, classifies specific uses that are allowed within the boundary of the the classification boundary that we just saw on the previous slide. And what we are proposing with this classification is to limit uses to only exempt uses, or those uses that do not require a water right, like domestic, stock, some commercial uses, things like that. And then also to non-consumptive geothermal uses for things like heating or cooling, specific, businesses that do that sort of thing, or homes. And then what that means is no new groundwater rights will be issued for anything except those non-consumptive geothermal uses. It does not affect transfers. So if you wanted to take an existing use that has a water right and transfer that to either a different type of use or to a different place, that is not impacted by the classification in this case. So should still be able to go ahead and transfer existing rights to other types of uses or other places. And now that was short, but I'll turn this back over to Tim to talk a little bit more about the critical groundwater area.
Thanks, Jason. So as we talk about the critical groundwater area rules, this is the bulk of what's being proposed in the Division 512 rules. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through those rules ahead of this meeting. And we're not going to go line by line through the rules, but we're going to try to summarize, the intent behind each aspect of the rules and call out the specific high points. I want to make a note that in this process, we can't tell you what the priority date cutoff is for regulation. And that's because what we're laying out here is a process by which we identify that and a process by which we reduce groundwater use, not and until that process is approved by the commission and adopted by the commission, we can't go through it and get to the final priority date number. So I want to make that clear that we're not going to present today a date by which we would regulate to. What we're going to talk about is the process, and what we're looking for feedback from the GWAC today is that overall process in our proposed rules. So starting out in the rule package, there are definitions in Rule 0010, so Rule 10, and I'm not going to go through those definitions to start. We're going to use those definitions and talk about those definitions as we go through and as the terms are used. So you can see the definitions there at the beginning of the rule packet, but as I said, we'll talk about them as we go here. So starting out with the critical groundwater area rules, begin with Rule 41. And in that rule, we define a goal for groundwater levels in that rule. And so the goal is defined as we want to stabilize groundwater levels in 30 years. And the term we use to establish that goal is the target water level trend. So we define that at the beginning of the rule pack in Rule 10, but the target water level trend is defined essentially as, what is the trend for water levels, and that's measured as zero decline over a 5-year period. And essentially what that means is groundwater levels can fluctuate up and down in the short term, but over a 5-year period, we need groundwater levels to be essentially stable. So that definition hopefully captures that water levels are variable, they're dynamic, they move up and down with recharge and with stresses and discharge, both pumping and natural discharge. But over the long term, in order to achieve sustainability, we want to see that target water level trend, what the water levels are doing over a 5-year period, to be stable. And the second piece of this that I want to call out is that 30 years. So we heard many times from the RAC that it took a long time to get into this problem for these groundwater level declines to reach this point. And for economic adjustment and a number of other reasons that they believe that we should take time to get out of it. And so the department is proposing that we achieve this goal, in 30 years. So not trying to get there faster than that. The second thing that is outlined here in Rule 41 are regular reviews of the rules. So this is required by statute, but we're putting it in the rules to make it clear exactly what we're intending to do. So every 3 years, we'll review the rules and the effect of those rules. And then every 10 years, we'll review the conditions that led to the critical groundwater area designation and see if the criteria are still met that authorize the designation of a critical groundwater area. So review the rules every 3 years, review of conditions every 10. And then with each of those reviews, we intend to present at a public meeting in the basin and accept comment, so both written and verbal. And then we'll summarize the comments, presented at that meeting and present those to the Water Resources Commission at a meeting that is properly noticed where public comment is accepted. So anyone can present or anyone can provide public comment at the meeting that happens in the basin. And they can also provide public comment directly to the Water Resources Commission. And if they present at that meeting in the basin, their comments will be summarized and presented to the commission. So there'll be 2 options for, a direct comment, and one of those would include a summary that the department will put together for the commission. And then a couple other items that are in Rule 41 that I think are important and worth pointing out. Is we are denying new applications for groundwater rights other than the non-consumptive geothermal rights. So this prevents the department from having to review applications for water rights. And it makes it very clear to users in the basin that there will not be any new groundwater rights being issued other than that non-consumptive geothermal use. And then data is critical to this process. As you'll see as we go through the rules, we need to be able to have good, accurate water level measurements over the management period. And so we're explicitly defining authorities to measure any well on a water right within the critical groundwater area. And the intent here is to be able to carry measurement long-term through the process and be able to, track water level trends and evaluate, if we're achieving success or not. And then the last thing that occurs here in this Rule 41 is that we divide the critical groundwater area into sub-areas. And I've got a map here of the proposed critical groundwater area and sub-areas. So first of all, I want to call out that the exterior boundary that we're proposing for the critical groundwater area is the current Greater Harney Valley groundwater area of concern. It encompasses the lowlands and the vast majority of pumping in the Harney Basin and the vast majority of groundwater rights. The second thing I want to point out here is that by dividing the basin into sub-areas, we're able to target reductions to the areas of most severe decline while having lesser reductions in areas with less severe declines. The department had proposed initially 15 sub-areas. After time working with the RAC, we modified those boundaries a little bit and changed them into this 7 sub-area approach. And when we were considering sub-area boundaries, we were looking at a number of things, both scientific and then more administrative or social in nature. So the scientific ones were really water level trends. So which wells were responding similarly. We looked at hydraulic gradient. So what's the flow of groundwater doing? We looked at the subsurface materials. So again, those geologic units, the rocks that the groundwater exists within. And then we also looked at NDVI data after the RAC pointed us to the desire to have some sort of surface water considerations. And NDVI data basically helped us see how far is surface water making it across the lowland landscape. And that helped define this boundary in between the Sylvies and Northeast Crane. And then when we talk about more, social and administrative considerations, we heard loud and clear from members of the RAC that more boundaries is likely to lead to more conflict. So the more times, the more sub areas there are, the more times there will be someone on one side of the boundary or another, and that causes conflict and is potentially not helpful. We also heard that voluntary action is important to the Harney Basin, and users there wanted to have larger groups of people included in subareas so that there was more opportunity for collaboration. And we think that's important as well. And then the last consideration there from an administrative standpoint is that more subareas increases complexity. So the more lines on the map, the more likely it is for people to be confused about where their property, where their wells are within a subarea. So fewer lines reduces complexity and is another reason for this 7 subarea approach as opposed to the original 15 subarea approach. So again, this is Exhibit 3 in the rulemaking packet, and you can take a look at that more in depth when you have the chance. So now I want to move on to Rule 50, and Rule 50 is where we establish the permissible total withdrawal for each subarea. And so in the definitions back in Rule 10, we define permissible total withdrawal as the annual volume of groundwater the department has determined can achieve the target groundwater level trend by 2058 when following the schedule for reductions defined in Rule 70. So essentially what we're saying here is very clearly the PTW, the permissible total withdrawal, is a volume of pumping that we believe will achieve our goal on the timeline for our goal when implemented following the schedule that we're outlining here in these rules. And this PTW is presented in acre feet by subarea. So each subarea has a permissible total withdrawal. And in this next slide, we'll take a look at what those are. So here we've got a table that shows by subarea. The first column is estimated 2018 pumpage. 2018 was the last year in the groundwater study where pumpage was estimated. We've got the next column here, which is the proposed PTW. So this is what's proposed in rule. And then last column here shows the difference between the 2018 estimated pumpage and our proposed PTW. I want to make it really clear that these percentages vary or will always vary based on whatever you use as a base year. So we used the 2018 estimated pumpage because we believe this is the most accurate assessment of what water use is actually occurring. If you were to change these numbers instead of using estimated 2018 pumpage and then use water rights, these percentage numbers would be vastly different because there are far more water rights than there is actual pumping. And then I also want to call out that we used the Harney Basin groundwater model to identify these PTW values. The Harney Basin groundwater model was built by the USGS in collaboration with OWRD staff as part of that groundwater study. It was released during our rulemaking process, and we heard loud and clear from the RAC that they believed we should use the best available science, the tools that we had to help determine what the allowable pumpage should be. And so we used that model. Staff spent hundreds of hours running that model and identifying these PTWs. And the way in which the model was used, we identified a schedule for reductions. We identified a goal, that goal that we want to achieve, the timeline for achieving that goal. And then we also included the subareas. And with all those parameters included, we were able to run the model in an iterative fashion and identify what's the maximum amount of pumping that achieves our goal on that time frame. And so these are the values that came out. And as we can see, the overall reduction from 2018 pumpage is about 35%. I want to call out too, Weaver Springs, the area of the largest decline and most severe rates of decline. In collaboration with the RAC, the department decided to propose a fixed 75% reduction. So we did not try to maximize pumping in Weaver Springs. We set the reduction at 75% there to address that deep cone of depression that exists there, and So that sub-area is treated differently throughout the rules. So now I want to talk about how we actually will reduce use. What is the process for doing that? So in Rule 60, we lay out a process by which we're going to establish current use. So the intent of this process is to provide water to the maximum number of beneficially used rights as possible. We believe that we don't want to reward people for speculating on water or not, getting value out of not used water rights. And so the intent of this initial allotment is to get water to the people that have made the investment in the infrastructure and have been actually using that water beneficially historically. And this initial allotment is going to be an order that reduces the quantity of water allowed to be pumped under each right. And as I said, this is laid out in Rule 60. So that's the intent behind it. And then there's essentially three different classes of water right that I want to talk about how we're going to go about determining this initial allotment. So the first one is irrigation rights, and this is the vast majority of water rights in the Harney Basin. So the first thing we wanted to do was incentivize conservation. And so we're proposing that to use a duty of 2.5 acre-feet per acre for primary and supplemental groundwater rights. So most all rights in the Harney Basin have a 3 acre-foot per acre duty. And the duty is the volume of water that can be pumped per year per acre. And so by reducing that duty from 3 acre-feet to 2.5 acre-feet, what we do is we allow the PTW, that amount of water that can be pumped, to be spread out across potentially more rights and hopefully reduce the economic impact of these rules on the basin as a whole. The second thing we want to do is consider the historic beneficial use in the 5-year period from 2020 to 2024 when identifying the number of acres that will be allotted water. And so here I've got a figure on the right-hand side to help illustrate this point. So if the black line here, consider that as your traditional field. Inside, we've got this red line that outlines this obviously green irrigated space on this satellite image. You've got essentially a center pivot. And if the place of use, the black line, that field, that water right, is 160 acres, but the red irrigated space is only 125 acres, what we want to do is allot water to just that 125 acres and not allot water to the brown corners, if you will. And so when allotting water, what we would do is we'd take that 125 acres, we'd multiply it by the 2.5 acre-feet per acre, and that gives you a total volume of water that could be pumped under that right. So this would be the initial allotment for this water right, and that would be issued in the form of an order reducing someone's use. And again, the intent here is to make sure that the people who have been using water have water, and that these brown corners, they're not rewarded for these brown corners, that those brown corners worth of water gets taken and allotted to another user who's been beneficially using water. The next type of water right I want to talk about is municipal and quasi-municipal uses. So in Harney County, that's primarily the cities of Burns and Hines. And what we're proposing is to allot 110% of the greatest single-year quantity reported in the 5-year period from 2020 to 2024. So I've got a figure here on the right-hand side. I believe this is a rounded estimate of the reported water use from the city of Burns. And you can see that the greatest single-year quantity of use was in 2020. They used 1,250 acre-feet. So what we're proposing is to allot them that 1,250 acre-feet plus 10% for a total allotment of 1,375 acre-feet for use by the city under that water right. We're also proposing that we reevaluate at each adaptive management checkpoint and adjust the use again by up to 120 110% of the greatest single year quantity in the preceding 6 years. So as you'll see in the rules later on, we have this adaptive management plan we lay out, and we do checkpoints at every 6 years. At those checkpoints, we want to reevaluate use by the municipalities and the quasi-municipal rights, and then allot water at 110%. So adjust their use up or down based on what they're actually using and what they actually need. The intent here is to provide water to those municipal uses for human consumption, and again, to minimize the economic impact by not holding in reserve a large quantity of water that may or may not be used by a municipality, and which would result in regulation of active groundwater rights that are being beneficially used and providing economic benefit there in the basin. So that's muni and quasi-muni. And then the last sort of segment of rights I want to talk about are all the other rights. So I believe there's about 42 of these, and each one would need to be considered individually. They encompass a variety of different types of uses. Think like commercial or industrial manufacturing, pond maintenance, etc. And instead of specifying a specific way in which we'll allot water to them, what we have outlined here is a process by which we'll try to identify the historic beneficial use and a list of considerations, things we're going to look at when we go to do that in this initial allotment process. And those considerations include the limits of the groundwater right. So what was allowed under the original groundwater right, and obviously we wouldn't want to allot more water than what was allowed by the original right. We want to look at that historic beneficial use in the 5-year period from 2020 to 2024, just like the other rights. We want to look at whether or not water is physically capable of being pumped and put to a beneficial use. So do they have water use infrastructure? Have they, demonstrated that they're actually capable of pumping the quantity of water that was on their water right? And then this broad, any other factors deemed appropriate by the department to determine that historic beneficial use. So we can't think of all the possible pieces of information that might be brought forward to identify what the historic use has been. And so we want to provide ourselves with the opportunity to be able to include a wide variety of information as we go about this process. So that's the initial allotment period or process. And so initial allotment gives us, what's actually being used in the basin right now. What is that, that current use? Now, if we're going to get to the PTW, we have to reduce use. And so we take that initial allotment, we subtract the PTW, and that gives us the volume of water that needs to be reduced by subarea. And the purpose of this calculation is so that we can then schedule those reductions over time. And so here in Rule 70, we're laying out a process by which we schedule those reductions. We wanted to make it very clear, so we put it in rule that junior rights will be curtailed first. So there's the initial allotment process, which reduces people down to what they've actually been using. But then when it comes to reducing use, like actually reducing use, junior rights will be curtailed first. And that means completely curtailed. So the most junior right would be completely shut off before the next most junior right is affected. We also make it clear in the rules that these orders will not be enforced until after the contested case process is complete. So in order to reduce water right and use, first we have to go through this process of adopting rules and setting up the permissible total withdrawal. And then the department must go through a contested case process where people are provided due process and can essentially contest the orders against them, reducing their use. And it's essentially that, the water user's day in court. And until that process is complete, we won't enforce any of these orders. We also make it clear that if enforcement doesn't occur as scheduled, so if for some reason the contested case process lasts longer than we anticipate and we can't actually enforce those orders until after we've well after the scheduled enforcement like timeline, that all the reductions that were scheduled, including any adjustments that we might make or should have made through the adaptive management process, will be enforced. So we're proposing to start in 2028. If enforcement isn't able to actually occur until 2030, we would enforce all the reductions scheduled from 2028 through 2030 at that time when we can actually implement them. And as I said, this is Rule 70. So now I want to talk about what that schedule for reductions looks like. So in the rules, we're proposing to reduce use by 40% in the first year, wait 6 years, add 30%, wait 6 years, add 15%, wait 6 years, add 10%, and wait 6 years and add 5%. Now, the reason for this schedule with the pauses in between the reductions is to allow the groundwater system to adjust to the changes that we've made and to be able to track those changes in water levels and then adaptively manage. And we'll get to the adaptive management process here in the next slide. So this figure lays out essentially, if this is the initial allotment, in 2028, we'd implement a 40% reduction. In 2034, we'd add on 30%. So now it's 70% of the total reduction is implemented by 2034. By 2040, 85% of the total reduction is implemented, 95% in 2046, and then we get to the full total reduction in 2052. So this is the schedule that's laid out in the rules. One thing I want to call out is that Weaver Springs is again treated differently. So we are enforcing 75% fixed reduction in Weaver Springs. When it comes to scheduling reductions, Weaver Springs falls outside this schedule, and 75% of the reduction would occur in year 2028, and the remaining reduction would occur in 2034. So Weaver Springs reaches 100% of the total reduction in 2034. And we also exempt Weaver Springs from adaptive management. So Weaver Springs is the most severe area of decline in the basin. We're treating it differently from start to finish with the goal of filling in that cone of depression and resolving that, that essentially hole in the groundwater system there. And then just want to point out that this figure is illustrative only. The 1,000 acre-feet numbers don't matter. We used round numbers so that it was easy to build out a bar chart that made sense here. So again, initial allotment, schedule for reductions, and we get down to the PTW by 2052 with the intent of stabilizing groundwater levels by 2058. So a 30-year timeline to get to our goal and a 24-year reduction period to allow for economic adjustment. The other thing I'll say about that 6-year pause is that it allows for some certainty. So if you're a groundwater user that was not curtailed in this 2028 timeframe, you know that you have 6 years before the next round of reductions and you would potentially be reduced. And so that is an opportunity for you to have some certainty in your business decisions as you move forward as a water user in the basin. So now I want to go to Rule 80, and this is where we lay out adaptive management. And adaptive management is basically, how do we evaluate our progress and how do we adjust our management actions based on measured groundwater levels. So in working with the RAC through this process, I want to make clear that this is the first time the department has ever tried to put something like this in rule. We haven't ever tried to adaptively manage based on groundwater levels. And so this is a new process for us. And in working with the RAC, the first thing we heard, or one of the things we heard, was that there should be an opportunity for users to voluntarily reduce and potentially prevent reductions from having to occur in the first place. So in this Rule 80, right at the start, we propose evaluating groundwater levels in 2027 and will delay any reductions that are scheduled for 2028 if water levels in that subarea are at or above their 2022 levels, and if the target water level trend is achieved. So we need both stability in the groundwater level trend, and we need water levels at 2022 levels. And that's evaluated based on the median groundwater level for that subarea. And then if if both of those criteria aren't met, we'll adhere to the reduction schedule. So implement the reductions that we have scheduled in rule. So that's how we get started, and the evaluation we do ahead of the initial round of curtailment. Once that curtailment process is started, we have adaptive management checkpoints laid out in 2033, 2039, 2045, and 2051. You'll notice that these are all 1 year ahead of when reductions will actually be enforced. The purpose for that is to allow the department time to crunch the numbers, evaluate the median water level for each subarea, make adjustments, and announce those adjustments effectively in the basin ahead of when people are making business decisions for the next year. And so when we evaluate the median water level for each subarea, we're going to compare it to the modeled trajectory. So using that Hardy Basin groundwater model, we identified trajectories, and these are in the rule packet in the exhibits. And those trajectories are what we're going to evaluate water levels against. And so if our water levels are on track, then we're not going to make any adjustments to the scheduled reductions. That means water levels are behaving like we expected, and we're on path to success. So continue to implement the reductions as scheduled, and don't make any changes. If water levels are higher than expected, so our changes have actually had more benefit than was anticipated, and water levels are higher, then we can implement fewer reductions. And there's specific criteria in the rules for how high those water levels have to be in order to implement fewer reductions. But reductions could be reduced by half or completely. So depending on how high the water levels are, it is possible for reductions to not occur at that adaptive management checkpoint. And then if water levels on the flip side are lower than expected, so water levels are trending more poorly than we had expected, we can implement accelerated reductions. So we can see either 1.5 or double the amount of reductions. And then we also define some process here in Rule 80 about how we'll announce these changes, and there'll be a meeting in the basin where we'll accept public comment. But essentially, we'll be able to announce those reductions and what's expected, and then move forward with the regulatory process to enforce orders and reduce use as needed. And then we've got this adaptive management flowchart. It's really hard to see here on the image, so highly recommend you go on our website and take a look at that. I believe we sent it out to GWAC as well. And this basically just outlines that iterative process where we go through, we evaluate water levels, we make decisions, we announce our findings, we implement the reductions, and then we go back and start over every 6 years, going through that process. And then eventually, once we've reached 30 years, we do an evaluation for success. So when we talk about evaluating success, this is also defined in Rule 80. We do not want to evaluate for success any sooner than 2058. And that's because we anticipate that water levels are going to have short-term recoveries in response to curtailment. And what we don't want to do is evaluate for success too early and have declared success when water levels are going to start declining again after that initial bump from the effect of curtailment. And so we specify in the rules that no sooner than 2058 we'll evaluate the water level trends and test to see if the goal has been achieved. And then depending on the results, we specified additional actions that may be taken. And these actions are specified to provide some level of certainty to the water users there in the basin. So if we're unsuccessful, so water levels are still declining and pumping is greater than the PTW, so that means we haven't fully implemented our scheduled reductions because of our adaptive management plan, then we authorize the implementation of the remaining reductions. So continue moving towards that PTW and continue evaluating for success. If we're unsuccessful, so groundwater levels are still declining, and we've implemented all the reductions, pumping is equal to the permissible total withdrawal, then we'd need to do rulemaking to adjust the PTW down to reduce use more. And that process is essentially what we're going through right now. And then the last bullet here is if successful, so we've achieved the goal and pumping is greater than the PTW. So that means we didn't need to implement all the reductions and we achieved the goal. Then the department should do rulemaking to adjust the PTW up to what is actually being pumped currently. And that gives water users some certainty that additional reductions won't be taken in the future. It allows them that, that certainty that their water right is going to be usable going forward. So that is the critical groundwater area process. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Jason to talk about the serious water management problem area.
All right, thanks, Tim. So serious water management problem area. Next slide, please. Okay, this, if it looks familiar, the boundary of the serious water management problem area is the same as the classification boundary. And after we had discussed these boundaries with the RAC, we came up with keeping them the same. Provides a little more certainty and a little more clarity for everyone, we felt. So we kept that boundary the same as the classification boundary. Next slide, please. So under the serious water management problem area, there is a measuring device requirement, as I spoke about a bit earlier. And that requirement is that by March of 2028, all groundwater rights in that boundary, well owners and well operators need to install and maintain a totalizing flow meter on each well listed as a point of appropriation on a water right. So every well on each water right in that basin needs to have a measuring device that's functioning and needs to be maintained. And I'll point out here, most of the water rights in the basin, probably at least 75%, probably 80% or a little over, already have a requirement to install a measuring device, and most already have those installed. They just need to make sure that that existing device is operating properly and is logging is a totalizing flow meter logging the use. And each of those flow meters, they need to be installed according to the specifications from the manufacturer, also maintained in good working order, and also accessible by department staff. So if a water master needs to come out and check, just do a spot check, maybe we see something odd in the data that's reported, we'll send the water master out just to make sure there's not something wrong with the flow meter or it's reading incorrectly. And then, of course, failure to install can result in a well being regulated off. And if it is regulated off and the landowner or well owner turns it back on again, that can lead to assessment of civil penalties. Typically, this isn't a process, obviously, we don't like to use. We rarely have to use it. So if we can avoid it, we definitely will. We want to work with the landowners to try to get things in compliance. One thing I will also point out here is the department currently has a measuring device cost share program where the department can pay up to 75% of the installation and the cost of the flow meter for folks. So that reduces the burden on folks that need to install flow meters quite a bit. Typically what happens is it's a reimbursement program. So typically what happens is the landowner or well owner will go ahead and install a flow meter and then sign up for this cost share program, send the application with receipts into the department, and the department will reimburse 75% of those costs. Next slide, please. And so the reporting requirement on the swamp or serious water management problem area is that the data needs to be recorded monthly. So every month, the well owner or operator needs to go out and record that data off the meter, maintain that data, and then report that data annually by the end of the year, December 31st, so that we have that record and we can review that data before the next irrigation season. Next slide, please. So any non-functioning meters need to be reported within 48 hours of discovery. So if landowner goes out, sees that the meter is broken or not reading properly, needs to report that into the department, the water master, within 48 hours. And then water can continue to be used under that water right, but only for a period of 60 days. That meter needs to be replaced or repaired within that 60-day period, or it will lead to a regulatory action of shutting that particular well off until the measuring device is repaired or replaced. And during that 60 days, measurement is still required, and within the rule language, there are options for those measurements and those include something that's often done is power meter readings during that time, so that we can roughly calculate about how much water is being used based on the size and specifications of the pump. So that would suffice as a replacement during that 60 days for recording use. Also, once that meter is repaired or replaced, that needs to be also reported back to the water master, so we know that you're up and going, things are good to go, and we don't have to continue to monitor whether or not there is a meter that's functioning on that particular well. Next slide, please. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kelly. He's going to talk a little bit about next steps in this process.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Tim. So in terms of next steps, right, as Justin reiterated, that we're in the public comment, and our public comment period here is going to be ending on August 7th. And between basically August through December, we're going to be preparing a staff report to our Water Resources Commission. And within that staff report, it's going to detail a summary of all the public comments that we've considered, any changes and adjustments to those rules based off of comments received. And then in December, we bring that staff report in and we ask for adoption. In terms of you all, the GWAC committee, hopefully today in our conversation, we will get some sort of recommendation after the conversation from the GWAC. We're going to take that recommendation and we're going to likely make changes to the rules based off of your recommendations today. Can we go to the next slide? In terms of members of the public, there's a couple of ways that you can submit public comments. One, it could be written public comments, and it could be just sent to the email on your screen here. Written public comments email, or it could be also mailed to the department using that address here. Again, there is also going to be another public hearing in Burns on August 5th at the Harney County Community Center. That's an opportunity for the public to make oral comments if they do not want to submit written comments. And it's going to be from 10 to 12 p.m. at the Harney County Community Center. It's the first hearing. The second hearing will be in the evening from 5 to 7 p.m. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Kelly, will there be a hybrid option for those?
Correct. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. Yes. So the August 5th meeting will be a hybrid option with Zoom. The Zoom registration stuff is all on our Division 512 website.
We are. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Jason, Tim, and Kelly. Really appreciate your presentation and the time you put into this. Right now at this stage, committee members, this is the time to ask if you have questions about anything that has been presented here. This committee has seen presentations about this rulemaking over the years, and including our last regular quarterly meeting, but this is maybe the most in-depth and the most final presentation. So if you have clarifying questions, please ask them now of the department staff. But if you have strong opinions, hold those opinions, because we are going to get to the committee discussion and debate after public comment. So use this time if you have clarifications, questions, or even suggestions to Tim, Jason, and Kelly about the presentation, because I suspect they'll be showing this presentation to the commission as well. So let me stop there.
I don't have any questions right now.
No questions.
Wow.
All right.
Well, I hate being first.
All right, you don't have to go first.
One thing I would like to do is I would like to hear Ken, since he's involved in it, what his take on this is.
Ken, if you have questions for staff, then please do ask them, but Ken's take, we will.
Right, I understand.
Yeah. Ken's opinion on the rules. Ken, if you don't mind holding those until we get to our committee debate time on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't particularly have any, there's a couple clarification things that we've talked about before in rules time but I don't think that this is the correct time to talk about it now. I'll do it a little later.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Stephen, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Thanks. Look, I'm thinking about the municipal process of allowing them 110% of the previous 5 years annual use. How is that going to kind of dovetail with conservation plan requirements of looking at longer timeframes for planning for municipal use, and how does that line up with the shorter timeframes that are allocated in this rulemaking?
Really good question, Stephen. We have been trying to balance the need for a municipality to plan long-term with the impact of holding water for a municipality that would be incurred by actual groundwater users being curtailed. So for every acre foot of water we allocate or allot to a municipality, we have to take that away from someone else. And that causes a financial impact. I would love to hear thoughts from someone like yourself who, manages the water for a municipality, how you would see the answer to your own question. Not having run a municipality, I don't have a good sense for what that long-term planning looks like. And when we're looking at the kind of financial impact that these rules are likely to have on the basin, I don't know what the long-term planning for a municipality actually, like Burns or Hines actually looks like. And we're hopeful we're going to get good feedback from them as well. So sorry, that's the answer.
Follow-up question. Is the allocation for municipal use included in the permissible total withdrawal?
Yeah, so the permissible total withdrawal is the total amount of water that can be pumped within a sub area. So Burns and Hines are both in the Sylvie sub area. The permissible total withdrawal is set, and so their allotted water comes out of that PTW. And regardless of their priority date, they will be allotted water and not curtailed because human consumption is the priority there.
So I guess thinking about from the municipal standpoint, given that you basically allowed for a 10% growth in a 6-year period, 10% growth that would be pretty substantial for a municipality. So I think having that built in on every 6 years, the city would potentially have that 10% growth allotment would provide some certainty that if growth happens, the municipality would have the water to supply that.
Yeah, that was our thought. One question I kind of have for you, and don't need an immediate response by any means, but we had heard the comment that what if the city is trying to do a large scale growth all at once, right? So a housing development or something like that. You're trying to put in, I don't know, 30, 40 homes. That's going to cause an increase in your use, but you're not going to see it, and you're not going to be able to realize that until the next checkpoint. Like, you actually have to use the water in order to grow. And so, how does it make sense to build some sort of mechanism in by which a city can apply essentially for more water, or guarantee themselves that 10% ahead of when we're going to adjust?
And if I could chime into the other aspect of that comment as well, is that the cities are actively doing conservation efforts. And if we're doing a rolling average, then they're going to be essentially, with lack of a better word, punished for these conservation efforts for using less water. So just kind of adding some context to the question.
Yeah, and I guess thinking about how I've been involved with water planning, you assume a percentage over a certain period of time, 10, 20 years, but oftentimes those development happen in a 1 or 2 year period where you've got a subdivision that goes in, and all of a sudden you now have 30, 50, 70 more homes, and all of that water hits immediately. Or industrial commercial users within the city come in. And so I do think having some ability to account for that may be beneficial. But I don't know exactly what time frame that should be. Because I think from the time that you know that a subdivision or growth is going to happen, it takes a number of years for that to usually come to fruition. And so you may have that 6-year period might be adequate.
Okay.
Unless it happens like right at the beginning of the 6-year period. Like the planning happens, you hit the 6th year, and then development happens right after the 6-year window.
Right.
Okay.
Good questions. Thank you, Stephen. I also see that we have another committee member who joined online. Eric, if you're there, could you come off mute really quickly, just quickly introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, my apologies for being late. I had something come up this morning. My name's Eric Schneider. I am Vice President of Drilling at Schneider Water Services, also the current sitting president for the Oregon Groundwater Association.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. And Linda, has anybody else joined from the committee? Okay. Well, if anybody else happened to join online from the committee, please also come off mute, join Eric in introducing yourself. And otherwise, I will double check, Eric or Dick, you two haven't spoken up. Do you guys have any questions for department staff on their presentation?
I'll preserve mine for our strong feelings for later.
All right. We've got some hot takes coming from Dick. Great. Eric, for what you caught of the presentation, do you have any questions for department staff at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay, wonderful. One quick clarification I wanted to offer to the department staff. Tim, when you mentioned you were talking us through the target water level trends of a 0 decline rate, I just wanted to clarify that's also assessed at the median across the entire sub area. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I think that's an important clarification to make. You talked about that up front, that the target water level trend was 0 feet of decline across 5 years. We're actually talking about a spatial median across an entire sub area, which is actually kind of permissive. It means that like half of the wells in the sub area can be declining and still achieve a median, target water level trend of 0. So just wanted to make sure I understood that. And secondly, actually, Stephen, you had another question. Go ahead and chime in before I get to my next one.
I was gonna kind of build on that comment that you had about the median, like by using the median, although it does reduce the impact of extreme outliers, whether they be on the high or the low side, it also doesn't tell you necessarily if your overall volume of the sub area is declining or not. And so you could have the median be close in a group, but then have some large outliers that are kind of having a significant impact on the overall system.
Good point. Tim or department staff, did you guys take that into account? If you had a median, but you had an outlier, especially a declining outlier?
Yeah, thanks, Zach and Stephen. It's a really good point. So when we did our modeling, we did some sensitivity analysis around spatial variability specifically, right? So as we had 15 subareas, they were much smaller, wells were grouped more tightly, and there was less likelihood of spatial variability within a subarea. As we moved to these much larger subareas, spatial variability was a definite concern. And what we found is that in our modeling, the size of the outliers was actually pretty tight. Most of the subareas we were anticipating essentially outliers of less than 1 foot of decline per year at the worst. And on the positive side of things, it was substantially higher. The outliers were much larger, recovering. But generally that was because a cone of depression is filling in. And as a cone of depression fills in, the rate of recovery is really high at the start, and then it slows as the water level, stabilizes in that well. But over the time period, what we found is the absolute worst outlier on the negative side was still less than a foot of decline per year. And that was only in one sub area. Most of them were in the minus 0.3-ish feet per year. So yes, we did evaluate that. And we were willing to settle on the median, which is very permissive, as was called out by Zach, because we didn't see anything of severe concern there. So.
Got it. Thank you. One last question that I had is that, Jason, when you were talking about the SWAMPA, the Serious Water Management Problem Area, and the cost share fund availability, I remember that not in the GWAC's last meeting, but in the meeting before that, we heard from Bryn a legislative update that included at the time a possibility of the legislature adding more funds to the water measurement cost share program. Can anybody update the committee? Were those additional funds added by the legislature in this last session or not?
There were some funds added, but it was only, I believe, $50,000 for this next biennium. So it's significantly less. Fortunately, we do have a fairly good sized pot of money still remaining in that fund. So we still, have capacity to do quite a few measuring devices, but yeah, it was actually reduced from the prior biennium.
Got it. Thank you, Jason. I think that's important context for, as Oregon and as you all discuss a really substantial part of Oregon having metering requirements. Good that the fund exists, but, will be useful for the legislature to continue prioritizing that when possible. All right, well, that was my last question. Just one final check to see if any other committee members have any clarifying questions about the presentation we heard. Okay, not hearing any. One thing that I mentioned as a quick reminder at the top of this agenda is that we're gonna have a brief public comment period now before the committee discusses and debates our advice to the Water Resources Commission. As a reminder, this public comment period, this particular public comment today during this meeting is comments that go to the committee members. These are not overall public comments that will be incorporated into the Division 512 public comment period. So if you want to provide any feedback, just know that you are providing that feedback specifically to committee members on this Groundwater Advisory Committee. A few other notes about public comment, then I'll quickly ask Justin to fill in anything I missed. A few other notes about public comment. This is for feedback. This is not necessarily time for questions. We will not likely have time to answer any questions that the public has for department staff, but the Groundwater Advisory Committee is interested in transparently hearing the public's feedback on these proposed rules. We would appreciate it if you offered up your opinions or your points, but please refrain from asking questions because we simply won't be able to answer them at this time. We will have a short public comment period now, which is not on the agenda. We will hopefully have time at the end of the meeting today to have a longer public comment period. Let's see, I wanted to acknowledge that we've had public comment on this topic a couple of times in this committee. We've had prior meetings from this committee, including our last quarterly meeting. We've generally not received much public comment, but we remain interested in what people have to say and what people want us to know. So during public comment, please introduce yourself, provide your full name, tell us where you're from, and then provide your feedback to the committee. I'll thank you all in advance for keeping it brief. I'm kind of curious, can you please raise your hand or indicate in chat if you are interested in providing public comment? And then we will figure out if there's a lot of people. Thank you, Rob, I see you. If there are just a few people, we will have a little bit longer. But if there's a lot of people, we will keep the individual comment time a little bit shorter. So just giving 10, 15 seconds for folks. If we only see a few folks, okay, great. So we see Shellman, which I assume is Kristen Shellman. We see Rob, Larissa, Lisa, okay, Mario. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in, letting us know who all wants to provide comment. With this amount of public comment, I'm going to request that you keep your comments to 3 minutes total. That includes telling us, again, your full name, where you're from, and your point. I will be using a timer. We will have 3 minutes total for each commentator. And we will start more or less in the order that y'all raised your hand or added it into chat. So before we start, let me just double check. Justin, did I forget anything? Do you want to add anything related to public comment, or Linda or Chris or anybody else?
No, nothing more from me. And just to confirm, I see Rob, Frank, Kristen, I assume Shellman, Larissa Singhose, Lisa Brown, and Mario Gordu, if I pronounced that correctly. So.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Or I didn't.
Don't worry, Justin, we'll ask everybody to introduce themselves. All right, so please keep your comments to 3 minutes or shorter. I'll be using a timer. If you need more time, just remember there is time at the end, additional time at the end to continue public comment. So Commissioner Rob Frank, please go ahead, introduce yourself, provide your comment.
Thank you. My name is Rob Frank. I'm a Harney County Commissioner and a RAC 512 member. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. The Water Resource Department has over-allocated groundwater by a significant amount, almost 50%, despite evidence and studies as far back as the 70s alluding to the capacity of the basin. Harney County does not believe that the lower Blitzen subarea should be included in the critical groundwater area, as they're in a surplus for recharge. Silver Creek and Sylvie subareas aren't far behind in terms of not meeting the criteria. The idea of curtailing lower Blitzen by over a third when it's in a surplus for recharge is like your neighbor going broke and his accountant taking money from you so that the neighborhood doesn't go broke. We also have concerns that even though there's adaptive management built into the rule, there's not sufficient mechanisms in the rule to allow for positive corrections if the curtailment lever is pulled too hard. Also, the idea of a shared water reservoir, which to my knowledge is not a defined technical term, but it's a term that the department has continued to use to tie all the sub areas together, and that is concerning to the county. There's been a lack of coordination with governments throughout this process. Coordination with local governments is required by state statute for all state agencies, and there are specific statutes requiring coordination when it is in regards to water issues. The fact that the city of Burns and Hines are up in arms over this 110% of their highest usage in the last 6 years is evidence of that. And I, being a RAC member and a publicly elected official who is representing our local government in this matter, only knew about this meeting today because a third party happened to forward the email to me. And that is a little frustrating. Harney County would have preferred prioritization of voluntary agreements, conservation, and locally driven solutions over excessive curtailment that has the potential to reduce our economic drivers by over 10% countywide. And that's a blow that will be hard for this community to withstand. That's all I have. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate your comments. I'll ask the committee members if they have any questions for specific public commenters at the end of this period. So we'll move on to Kristen. I think you were next.
Well, it is Kristen. Sorry, I didn't get my Zoom officially updated, but Kristen Shellman, former Harney County Commissioner and former Groundwater Advisory Committee member that only found out about this meeting by email as well. I think that with that transition, the department kind of dropped the ball between me transitioning out of that position and Rob transitioning in, and that there should have been some consistency with the Groundwater Advisory Committee in that regard. The comments that I'd like to provide today are pretty specific to compensation, as well as the establishment of vegetation. So I'll begin with, if the CREP is being considered as part of the resolution for reducing groundwater, how will those that fall outside of the CREP program rules be compensated for the taking of water rights? If the state is willing to recognize the economic impact and set up a CREP program for equity purposes, how will those water right users that are proposed to be regulated off be compensated by the state? How will the commission that you're presenting to be engaged in the advocating for this type of equity for compensation? And I would like that to be a thorough discussion from this advisory group of how that will be put forward. And then the second part, well, how will vegetation be established to prevent invasive weeds from taking over throughout the county where the regulation occurs? The CREP program obviously recognizes the need for establishment of native vegetation or vegetation that's sustainable to prevent that. And so what will be proposed in the areas of regulation that fall outside the CREP program to prevent invasive weed species from taking over? Programs for establishing dryland crops should have to be established before reduction should be implemented to prevent such a disaster from happening in this county. Economic impacts are already great enough without the ecological impacts also taking a bigger blow than they already will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate your comments. Who was next? Was it Lisa?
Larissa.
Oh, thank you. Larissa, go ahead, introduce yourself and provide your public comment.
Hi, my name is Larissa Singhos. I'm a farmer rancher in Riley, Oregon, which is in the Silver Creek Subbasin. And I've been involved in this Division 12 rulemaking for 10 years. I was on the original study advisory committee and on the rules advisory committee, and also been a part of local collaboratives about this water issue. The points I'd like to make is that the Harney Basin is not one groundwater reservoir by definition. The simplified definition of a groundwater reservoir does not consider aquifer characteristics like geology, recharge, and discharge, groundwater levels, and site-specific data. This implication of this oversimplified definition could devastating consequences for the basin and the rest of the state, because it allows the department to take a few critical wells in a very localized area and apply the regulations across an entire basin into sub areas and areas that don't fit the criteria. If you look at the definition of overdrawn, it is pumping exceeds recharge. If you put the whole groundwater system as one reservoir, then we do not meet that criteria definition, because we are 28,200 acre feet of recharge exceeds the pumping. So under Oregon law, that definition cannot be applied. The only definition that can be applied is the greater than 50-foot decline or the 3 feet a year. And that it only applies if you see the map that they put down in the Weaver Springs area and a few spread out wells in the Northeast Crane area. The other sub areas, the Sylvies, the Silver Creek, Lower Blitzen and Voltage, and Upper Blitzen do not meet any criteria for a critical designation. There is no data or technical or legal authority that the Water Resource Department can apply to put these rules on the whole entire basin. Also, some of the, I'm sorry, I had a lot more and I'm trying to simplify this down, so I have a few minutes. And in these rules, the department, I believe, lacks a legal and technical basis for regulation in those 4 sub areas that I mentioned. The department has a responsibility under statute to protect water rights, and that they cannot give preference to non-water rights water uses and use that to regulate water rights. So I would urge I would say the Groundwater Advisory Committee to advise the department to adhere to existing statutes and rules rather than pursuing unprecedented groundwater reductions through regulations that lack defensible and technical bases. And there is a lot of data that shows the critical designation does not apply to most of the basin. Thank you for letting me speak and on my comments, and I would gladly take any questions because there's a lot and this is very complicated. And I would just like to say that what is happening to the basin, if you don't know the whole story, I hope that you can dig into it, but the people of Harney County deserve better than what these regulations are proposing. It is going to have devastating consequences. We aren't just this data. There's more to this data than what's being presented to you, and I hope that you guys will dig into that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Larissa. Lisa Brown, you're up next. Please introduce yourself, provide your comment.
Thanks. Yeah, my name's Lisa Brown. I am a staff attorney with Water Watch of Oregon. I have been involved in groundwater issues out in the Harney Basin since 2014. I'm a member of the place-based planning group and helped on the groundwater and the surface water plans, and also was a member of the 512 RAC. And I just want to make a brief comment. I think both Commissioner Frank and Larissa sort of alluded to this, but you know, there've been declines over a number of years in the Harney Basin, and when you look at the like the slides and the graphs in the rulemaking packet, sort of the timeline starts at 2028 for the decline lines. But of course, we've had a lot of declines since 1980 or so, and we'll continue to have declines between now and 2028. So I think it's really important to kind of remember that context, you know, based on modeling by the USGS and by the department. There's already been a 42% reduction in discharge to lowlands springs and streams between 1980 and 2022, about the same 44% reduction in natural ET between 1980 and 2018. So I think we need to kind of keep in mind like where the basin has been and where we are on the trajectory when we look at the timelines that the department is proposing for curtailment. And we would certainly not want to see those timelines expanded. We think this is an urgent problem and encourage the committee to support the department's effort to stabilize groundwater levels out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. And Mario, you're up next. Please introduce yourself, provide your comments. You'll have 3 minutes. If you need more time, we can have time at the end.
Mario Pedrilli, Burns, Oregon. Ditto on the mean and medians. Medians are great for economic and demographic data. Means are for sciences, and we're dealing basically with a natural science here. As a statistician, I love medians. It allows me to skew the numbers, fudge them a bit to what my client needs. So I would recommend using a mean when establishing levels within each subbasin. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario. Appreciate the brevity.
Mike Martin from League of Oregon Cities would also like to give a comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Great.
Please.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Michael Martin, League of Oregon Cities, manage the water portfolio. I think I want to go more a little bit on process, and I would just, respectfully, beyond the technical nature of this subject matter that the advisory committee is dealing with. I just have concerns with process. I sit on a lot of RACs. I'm a part of this process, and I think this one, frankly, could be better in outreach in terms of impact. This is a conversation that our legislative director and our executive director have had with the governor's office. And, I respect, staff and advisory committee members' time. This is busy work. It's technical stuff, but I just respectfully ask that, we kind of level up in terms of outreach, especially when there's significant impact on this. So thank you very much for your time and much appreciated.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your comment. One quick check. I do want to get into committee discussion here while we have time for it, but one quick check. Are there any other members or folks online who want to provide public comment? Okay, not seeing any. Do any of the committee members have any questions briefly for the public commenters at this time? See some head shakes in the room. Give a second, folks online. Okay, very good. Okay, so I appreciate you all who provided public comment. As just yet another quick reminder, if you had more that you wanted to say, depending on how much time we have left at the end of this meeting, there will likely be another opportunity for public to provide any feedback additionally. But in the meantime, I'd like to move us along to committee discussion, debate, and development of advice to the commission. What I'd like to do here is, we heard a lot of content from Jason, Tim, and Kelly. I'd like to kind of break down what the committee would like to reach agreement on. What I'd like to do is provide our advice to the commission. There's basically 3 outcomes here for the committee to consider. Either we achieve consensus on a point or a topic. For example, a topic might be we agree that a critical groundwater area is necessary, perhaps. If we achieve consensus on that, let us signify that it is a full consensus agreement from the committee. If we only achieve majority agreement, then that's fine too. We should signify that it's majority instead of consensus. And then if we don't agree with it, we won't include it in advice to the commission. Now, how does that sound for a process for how we go through this? Sounds good. Okay. And just a quick note for committee members who are online, please do feel free to speak up because we can't see you on our screen. So if you have any problems or concerns about that approach, don't hesitate to let us know. I figure let's see, what I'd like to do is maybe just go across committee members. We'll each take a few minutes for general reflections or opinions. And then what I'd like to do, I took a list of 12 of what I see as key areas for this committee 12 topics I think the committee should discuss and see if we can achieve consensus or majority advice to the commission. And those 12 things are all things that we heard today in this presentation. But before we get to those 12 topics, general thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share are welcome at this time. No particular order in this request, so if any committee members would like to speak up and tell us what you're thinking when you're seeing these rules, what you're thinking at the outcome of that presentation, and what you're thinking with the feedback that we've heard from public comment, please feel free to speak up.
Well, under 060, we have acres of allocation, specific acreage that's allocated to a irrigator. I don't see where that's important. What's important in this is volume that's pulled out of the ground. Why do we care where the irrigator's putting the water or how many acres he's putting it on? He's allocated X number of acre feet. Let him determine what's the best use for his business. Which rolls into duty. Why are we putting a 2.5 acre foot duty on to the irrigators? Maybe he wants to put 3 acre, maybe he can monetize it better with 3 acre feet, but as long as he stays within his volume, why are we interfering with his business model?
Yeah, so you're referring to that kind of shared reductions approach of regardless of priority date.
No, what bothers me is that the department is interfering with the irrigator's means of making a living as long as he lives within the boundary of how much water he's pumping out of that aquifer.
Zach,
Let's say he switches from alfalfa to brewing barley or sugar beets. Maybe he puts in sugar beets and irrigates them with a drip system. And he can have 1,000 acres of sugar beets where he could only have 200 acres of alfalfa. I mean, we're limiting his options, even to the extent of the different soil types within the critical groundwater area that could take different amounts of duty.
Got it. Thank you, Dick. And Tim, I saw you come off mute. Would you like to provide some clarification about that?
Yeah, I want to just clarify, the initial allotment is to establish that volume. And once the initial allotment is established, that volume is established. And Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have no intention of telling people how much water they can put on per acre as long as it's within the limits of their original groundwater right. And we don't care what footprint they put that water on as long as it's within the bounds of their original place of use. So even though they might have less allotted to them because their historic use was not the full paper water right, they have that flexibility to manage their business how they want to. And if they want to do less acreage at 3 acre feet, they can do that. If they want to do more acreage up to the bounds of their place of use with less water per acre, they can do that as well. So we don't intend to get in the business of telling them how to run their farm. We're simply using that initial allotment piece to see what have they been historically using, allot water that way, get to that volume, and then that's the volume they get to use within their place of use of their water rights.
I appreciate the explanation, but at least in my mind, the summary that was given was rather gray in that area, should we say.
Well, this committee can provide advice such as, requesting clarification perhaps, or making the rules clearer that the allotment is based on historical pumping to reach a volume, but does not obligate the businesses to maintain that exact same footprint into the future.
Well, and I realize that at least in my area, the footprint is designated with the water right. But I also realize that in the area we're talking about, in the Malheur Basin, that a lot of these ranches are a lot larger than the footprint of their water right. And if they determine that they can grow crops without going above the boundary of their volume, why are they limited to the original area that they were issued the water right on? As long as they stay within the boundaries of their volume.
We're in agreement that the volume is what matters to the aquifer.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Not where they put it or how much per acre they put it.
So to that point, to expand on that, can I expand on that?
Please go ahead, Ken.
Why would it matter in a sub area who pumps the water as long as the PTW is not exceeded? Meaning, in a sub area such as Crane, why would if we put all of the water through one well, what difference would it make at the end of the day? Because this is the that also solves the municipality's problem if they need more water for additional growth. They can then go out into someone in that sub area and buy that water, or use it, or get it given to them free. We are not under the current Oregon law. We can't share water that way. That is one of the solutions that we're going to have in this basin to make our volunteer agreements and all the rest of these things work. Is that the point of appropriation and the point of use are going to have to be different, perhaps, from what the water right states. Given, again, if you're allotted as a user 2 gallons of water, what difference does it make where that water goes and out of which pump that water comes if it's within the same sub area? Does that make sense?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Yep.
So
Thank you.
This would require some, obviously, change in the current water law, which, because we have a critical groundwater designation, the department is allowed to do that.
So you're suggesting that we have a need for flexibility of where and how water is used beyond the water right permits conditions themselves. Is that right?
That's correct, because otherwise what it does, and we can spend hours discussing the difference between our water law and Nevada's water law and highest and best use and letting the market take charge and all the rest of this. But what it would allow is that we get the biggest benefit from the same amount of water, because we can direct it to where it would be needed the most or generate the most income or whatever. We can't currently do that within the same subbasin. I'm not suggesting we move it around all over the basin or into a different basin. I'm suggesting that we're going to be allowed to pump X amount of gallons or acre feet in a sub area, then we should be able to move that water around within that sub area.
Understood. Yeah, and I'm thinking about how, you know, these rules don't govern voluntary agreements, but nevertheless, voluntary agreements are like very closely adjacent to how these rules will be implemented. And so I'm trying to think about how can we convert this topic into advice to the commission about these rules. And one way we could do that, Ken, is something along the lines of, we could propose, and we don't need to debate it right now, but we could propose, for example, that the Groundwater Advisory Committee recommends to the commission that they consider voluntary agreements that may increase flexibility of where and how water is used. Something like that. Does that feel like it helps get at what you're saying with flexibility?
I think it does, yes.
Okay, I'm putting a note. That's going to be I'm adding that to my list. We're gonna have that as our 13th possible topic for the advisory committee to see if we can reach consensus on. Thank you. Great suggestion.
I'm a little concerned about the dropping old wells, you know, in certain areas. I'm totally against going a blanket approach. They need to, where there's a problem, they need to address it. But, you know, if you're over here and having, you know, it's hard to tell what's under there, you know? And if you don't, it's hard to regulate somebody that doesn't have a problem and go over here 4 miles, and I'm not sure how that basin lays. But in our area, you know, you can have huge difference in the wells. And that is my concern, that, you know, they're blanketing it. They've got the sub basins, but I don't know if it's, I understand him talking about the lines, too many lines makes more problems, but that's my concern.
Yeah, understood. I appreciate that. That's been a topic of continued debate for the past 2.5 or 2-ish years, I guess, 2 and change years at the rulemaking committee. You know, I don't, for what it's worth, the community, like the department proposed the increased spatial resolutions. The department proposed 15 sub areas, and the community members who are part of the rulemaking committee, and, you know, I don't want to speak for them, Ken can speak for himself too, but the community members on the committee pushed towards fewer sub areas and more generalization as a way that worked for them. So I hear you. That is a concern. That is a tension. How fine of a spatial resolution can we get? Ken, did I misrepresent anything there?
You did not. I mean, we can, at some point, I'm going to discuss the issue about how some of the sub areas are treated in the amount of curtailment. Again, that what's already been brought up about the lower voltage being curtailed off the second highest percentage of any of the sub areas, and it by definition we started to, they're not exceeding the recharge in that area, so that makes very hard to have that make sense to me to have a 39% reduction in that area. I mean, we've been around it a number of different times, but I still think that's a point that I assume it's one of your 12 points that we're going to need to discuss. So.
Absolutely. And I'm inclined, we've got an hour left. I'm inclined to just start going through that list and seeing what the committee thinks about these points. But before I do, any last thoughts, especially from folks online who I can't necessarily see, you know, Stephen, Eric, if you want to chime in, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'll move us into these 13 points for the committee to debate.
Let's move into the 13 points.
Wonderful.
I agree.
All right.
I agree.
Thank you all. Yes, Justin.
So real quick, in the past, I have put up a blank document and tried to take notes as best kind of in real time as the committee discusses, and then we can wordsmith it, and that has helped keep everything on the board, if you will. Is that something you'd like to do?
Let's do
now?
that. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
while Justin's pulling this up, I'll acknowledge, these 13 topics, we don't, I think we're gonna have to move fairly quickly through some of them, but if we don't reach consensus, that's okay. We don't need to spend a ton of time trying to convince each other. Let's just see where we are and see if there's a need to have a conversation about it. If so, we'll have the conversation, but I do want to keep an eye on time. So just keep that in mind, committee pals. All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Justin. And can you crank whatever font size is?
Yeah, it'll get bigger, but I'll make it bigger yet.
All right, sweet. Folks online, this probably doesn't matter to you, but here in the room, it can be a little hard to see. Great. All right. Well, the very first point is, does the committee have agreement that there is a need for corrective controls? There is a need to reduce groundwater use. In general, not specific to sub areas quite yet. We will dive into that.
Yes, I agree with that.
I agree with that as well.
This is Eric. Yes, there is a problem and something needs to be done about it.
Great. Thank you, guys. That one was fast. I agree. So I think that's something that the Groundwater Advisory Committee by consensus can tell to the commission and say, there's a problem here. We support the department's efforts in general to use corrective controls to fix the problem. Okay, let's get a little more specific. Is there, we heard about 3 different management designations. We heard about serious water management problem areas. That's a designation that will allow for metering of water use. We heard about classification. That's a designation that will prevent additional non-exempt uses except for geothermal, non-consumptive geothermal. And we heard about critical groundwater areas, which is the ability for the department to implement PTW's permissible total withdrawals. Each of those 3 has a boundary that we saw earlier today. We're not going to get into the boundaries quite yet. That'll be the next thing. But just in general, does the committee agree that those 3 tools are appropriate to use to address this problem? SWAMPA, critical groundwater area, and the classification. Does anybody object? I'll put it that way.
Yeah, this is Eric. Can they be applied? I mean, I still have serious concerns about data and knowing the problem and applying all 3 at once. No, using the data to figure out methods where one of these can be applied, or it's kind of like increasing severity. If one doesn't work, we need to take the next level. I'm a data guy. I want to see data, and I don't think we have the actual complete data. And I know that's really hard to get. Metering and monitoring, and before we start actually impacting it globally is one of my concerns. So yes, they can be used, not all at once, or it's kind of like a progressive, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, yes.
Let's see what we don't have to, we can spend as much time as needed on this. My personal stance is a little bit different, Eric. I see that with the USGS and WRD studies, the 2 groundwater budgets plus the groundwater model plus the monitoring data that the department has been collecting. I think it does demonstrate the need for all 3 of those tools, since they're different tools. They're not consecutive or sequenced. They're accomplishing 3 different things to me. I'm not saying that to try to convince you. That's okay if we don't agree on this. But let's just take a quick check. Are there other people who don't think that the 3 proposed tools are appropriate to use? Are there other people who would object to the statement, those 3 tools are appropriate to use in this basin? And it's okay if you do object. We should just check out whether we're at consensus or majority or not agreeing.
But it goes back to the blanket policy to me. That if you declare the whole place critical water, critical watershed problems, and I don't really agree with that. I think that's next.
That's coming up next. We'll talk about boundaries in just a second. Okay. But Do you agree that those tools
I should,
are
I
the
should be,
appropriate?
I do.
Okay.
So I agree with the tools. I just don't agree with how they're being proposed to be applied.
Give me just a little bit more on that, Ken.
So I think that the basin should be under the SWAMPA, but only parts of it should be under the critical groundwater area.
Got it. Okay.
I agree with that.
I'm gonna flag that as like the boundaries discussion, which we'll have in just a moment. But it sounds like, Ken, you agree that at least parts of the basin are okay to include under a critical groundwater area.
That's correct.
Okay. I will make sure that your opinion is represented about the boundaries in the very next step. Stephen, just checking in. It's okay if you don't have strong opinions, but what do you think about that?
I think the three tools are appropriate.
Okay, great. So let's just flag this as majority here, but not consensus, and that's okay. So the very next step, this is something, again, that is important to people. We heard it in public comment. We have talked about this as a committee for, several meetings in the past. The boundaries themselves, right now for those three management designations, the classification and the SWAMPA boundary are the overall basin. Then the critical groundwater area boundary is the valley, the lower basin. What used to be called the Greater Harney Valley Groundwater Area of Concern. So just checking in, does this committee think that the SWAMPA and the classification boundaries seem correct? We'll take those before we talk about the critical groundwater area.
I think they do seem correct.
Great. Okay.
This is Stephen. I would agree that the SWAMPA and the classification boundaries seem correct.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Appreciate you going through this process. Let's take or just one last, let's indicate that as a consensus from the committee. And then let's take the harder question, which is, does the committee, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Does the committee agree that the critical groundwater area boundaries seem correct?
No.
Thank you, Ken.
I don't even know.
Thank you, Dave. Okay.
So, sorry, I feel like I might have fallen behind. So we agree that the boundaries for classification and SWAMPA are correct?
Yes.
And okay.
But I don't think I won't say that yet, but Eric or Stephen, do you have concerns about the critical groundwater area extent?
Yeah, I would say no. I do have concerns, and I don't think they're correct.
Okay.
So this is Stephen. I guess I don't have concerns about the overall boundary at this point.
Okay, and I'll just add in my brief 2 cents, which is that, if it is one overall groundwater reservoir, then I personally feel okay with the overall distribution of the groundwater, critical groundwater area boundaries. But I see that we are not going to reach agreement. We have, of the 6 of us, we have 4 people who do not feel that the critical groundwater area boundary, is appropriate. So let's talk about that for a second. And what I want to make sure is, I guess there's a distinction. Right now, we would just leave that off of the advice to the commission. We would just not say the committee, the Groundwater Advisory Committee, does not agree we would just not say that we agree with the critical groundwater area boundaries. That felt weird to say, but that is the statement we are making. Does anybody object to that approach? Okay.
So we're not going to say that there are concerns, that the committee has concerns about the boundaries?
That's the flip side that I think is worth spending some time talking about. Eric, good call.
Not saying it is, not saying and not putting out there that there's some disagreement with this, is essentially agreeing by staying silent.
Okay, great. Good point. Well, let's talk about this then. I guess this goes back to thinking about the one basin idea. Do people disagree that there is one groundwater reservoir in the basin? Or in other words, actually, I'm injecting my opinion already. Let me back up and say, Eric's point is a good one. Let's talk about this and talk about whether the committee wants to provide a statement to the commission. And what I see as a hinge point is whether the Groundwater Advisory Committee believes that the entire Harney Basin is one groundwater reservoir. Full stop. Is there disagreement that the
I don't have enough information of the area to make that kind of decision. I haven't seen the data that would say, you haven't measured the wells yet all over. So I think we're missing a lot of data there.
Okay. I feel a little differently on that with the two studies that came out in the groundwater model that shows interconnectivity in the basin, but again,
like I said, I don't have the information to go one way or the other there.
Sure. Okay. No strong opinion from Dave. No, not enough information. Dave.
Absolutely. My feeling on that is, from what I've heard, we don't have very many well logs in that area of or the wells that are constantly measured. We don't have any ongoing data for such a large area. We have very scattered data, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And we have one sub area that isn't declining, that's inside of the area.
The Upper Blitzen.
So why isn't it excluded completely?
The lower Blitzen.
Whichever one it was, I don't remember, but
yeah, the lower
one that's not declining. So what's it doing in there?
Just running that back real quick. Can somebody confirm? I thought it was the Upper Blitzen that has not seen any declines. The Lower Blitzen is seeing limited declines. Is that, can Tim or other agency staff correct?
That's correct. The water level trends analysis shows that Lower Blitzen is declining and the Upper Blitzen is not, as you said.
Okay, so to restate, like the question is, why is the Upper Blitzen included in the critical groundwater area if it is not showing declines? I think that's fair to ask. And just as a reminder, Tim, can you further remind the committee why that was included? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so the justification behind that is that's a primary area in which recharge is flowing into that portion of the basin. And by including it as part of the critical groundwater area, we're able to deny applications for new groundwater rights in that area and further protect that recharge and allow it to make its way down into the lower Blitzen, where we have groundwater level declines. So it's a preventative mechanism, and we are not proposing reductions in that area. So groundwater rights that exist in that area would not be are not intended to be curtailed.
Thoughts?
Well, I understand the logic, but Okay, I'll withdraw mine. I mean, it made logic the way you're approaching it, yes. But by being inside the critical groundwater area, and somebody buys a ranch out there, wants to get a water right, it's a no-go completely, even though it's not declining there. Just because they're inside the critical groundwater area, they're denied a water right.
But if they were to
Why-
put in a
why
water right
rule?
there, then wouldn't they be impacting the recharge that would otherwise go to the lower Blitzen?
We don't know that, do we? Because there hasn't been enough study.
I think it's pretty well accepted that the groundwater in the upper Blitzen is flowing down gradient.
I agree, but it's not declining.
True. So you don't think the opportunity
Well, we
cost?
don't know until it's declining.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it's not declining there and you're shutting off future water, but the lower is declining, but what's recharging it is the same. It seems it's questionable data on, is this really going to do anything, or is it just going to limit the people in the upper when really there's a problem in the lower, or it's another recharge area from another direction that there's no data on it because we don't have enough wells and enough facts. So to penalize one area that isn't changing, isn't declining, that's not the problem. So why include them, I guess, is part of my thoughts.
The same with the lower area also, because there's decline there, but it's not declined to a point that would trigger the critical water area designation. So I think that the basin is in some way hydraulically connected, but we have chosen to split it into 5 sub-basins. So I think that we should, from consistency, for the sake of consistency, then we should treat each one of those sub-basins as a basin because of that's how we're treating them. Each one of them has a PTW. Each one of them has will have its own priority date, who gets shut off and who doesn't. And so in order to be consistent, I think we should just be consistent across the board then. So it's five separate little areas then that are in some way connected.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, yes, that they are hydraulically connected, but the committee has concerns about the inclusion of the upper Blitzen and questions about the inclusion of the lower Blitzen. Is that a fair statement? Tim, I see your hand up. Just one more second while I see if the committee has a response to that.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. If there is concerns about the interaction between the two and keeping them all, in one big basin when they are interconnected. I agree. But one is not causing the issue in the other, just based on the fact that it does not decline. So why is it included?
Okay, so maybe a draft statement that Justin can write up real quick, and then we'll continue discussion. I'll ask Tim to chime in. A draft statement would be that the Groundwater Advisory Committee agrees that the basin is hydraulically connected and one groundwater reservoir, but has questions about the inclusion of the upper Blitzen in the critical groundwater area.
And lower Blitzen.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely the interaction between the two. Recharge.
Yes. And just a quick note, Kristen, I saw your hand up. We will have additional public comment at the end of the committee discussion. I will get to you. Thank you for raising your hand. Tim, you've had your hand up as well. Go ahead and provide your perspective.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify my past answer to your question, because Dark pulled the water level trends analysis for me and pointed out that I'm wrong. So In the lower Blitzen, we have had at least one well decline by 39.8 feet. And in the upper Blitzen, we have had at least one well decline by 10.4 feet. That's magnitude of declines. So there have been wells that have declined that much. The median magnitude of decline for the lower Blitzen is minus 2.9 feet. So 2.9 feet of decline. The upper Blitzen median magnitude of decline is minus 0.7 feet. When we look at water level rates of decline, the lower Blitzen voltage subarea has had a median rate of decline of minus 0.3 feet per year. The upper Blitzen has a median rate of change of positive 0.1 feet per year, but we have wells that are negative and wells that are positive, and that is the stats coming directly from our water level trends analysis. There were only 4 wells evaluated in the upper Blitzen for rate, and in the lower Blitzen there were 27 wells evaluated for rate. In the upper Blitzen there were 10 wells evaluated for magnitude, and in the lower Blitzen there were 54 wells evaluated for magnitude. So just wanted to make sure the record was accurate and accurately represented the water level trends.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. So we are seeing declines as more so in the lower Blitzen, but some declines are present in the upper Blitzen. There's more data in the lower Blitzen, there's less data in the upper Blitzen. My inclination, I think based on that information and based on the modeled projections, which were in the memo that was sent out to the committee members that showed the lower Blitzen continuing declines if no action were taken. My inclination is I think that the lower Blitzen should be included in the critical groundwater area. I would like to take it off of that statement and just say that the GWAC has questions about the upper Blitzen being included. And it's okay if you disagree, but it sounds like, so folks online, Ken, you disagree with that statement, right? You have questions about the lower Blitzen being included at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So Stephen and Eric, going to you, what are your thoughts? Are you okay with the lower Blitzen being included, or would you prefer to leave that out as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely concerns with the lower basin. I'm just, making decisions for the upper basin based on the lower basin. That's where my concerns are. So I'm fine with taking it off. I've got concerns about the upper basin being included. So I'm fine with leaving the lower off.
Thank you.
Even, yeah, I'm good with leaving the lower Blitzen in.
Okay, so then the revised statement is from a majority perspective of the GWAC, but not a consensus perspective, that the basin is one hydraulically connected groundwater reservoir, but we have questions about the upper Blitzen being included in the critical groundwater area. Okay, I acknowledge there is debate there. There's more discussion to be had. I would like to keep us moving. We are 4 points in and we only have 30 minutes left. And I want to make sure we have some time for public comment near the end. So thank you. Appreciate the way that the committee members went through that. The next statement is kind of related. I had it as the committee agrees with the number and location of sub areas, and I would reframe that to say that the GWAC agrees with 6 out of the 7 sub areas and locations, with the exception being the upper Blitzen. Okay. Head nods. Thoughts online? Okay. Not seeing any objections. We'll take that for what it is. Let's move on. One thing that I think is kind of interesting about this rulemaking is that the department staff used a really high performance model, the Gingrich and others USGS model from 2024, to optimize for how to how to avoid needless impacts on businesses. And one thing that I think might be important for the GWAC to tell the commission is, the GWAC supports the department's use of a model to minimize needless impacts on the economy. Is that fair to say? Does that ring true to committee members?
For me, yes. Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
This is Stephen. Yes, I believe using the model for minimizing impacts is a good idea.
Okay. Ken, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I get, yeah. Either way, I'm just, yeah. Non-committal.
Non-committal, all right, gotta use something, yep, all right. And great, so I think that just telling the commission that yes, the overall approach that the department took for determining PTWs is a strong one. The model-based approach to optimize. Okay, great, wonderful. Moving more quickly now.
Real quick, did I capture that correctly?
Yes, that looks great. Thank you, Justin. Okay. Thanks for trying to make our comments concise. Another cool thing, another interesting thing we heard a little bit about today, adaptive management framework. Never been done in Oregon Basin rulemaking before. This adaptive management framework allows for voluntary agreements, for example, to reduce curtailment moving into the future if voluntary agreements are successful. So the adaptive management framework, one proposal that this committee could tell the commission is that this committee supports the inclusion of adaptive management frameworks into the basin rules. I think that's an important and cool thing to call out. That's a unique part about these basin rules. It allows the community more agency in which tools they will use beyond regulation to achieve stable water levels. So is that something that this committee can achieve consensus on, that the adaptive management framework is an important inclusion in these rules? See some head shakes in the room, head nods, I should say.
I think very, very important.
Yeah, definitely required in my opinion.
I agree.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree. Required. I think it's setting a cool precedent for future basin rules. So that's great. Okay, maybe getting a little bit more into the weeds here. This is already good feedback towards the commission. We still have some time. I'd like to dive just a little bit deeper into some of these specifics that were raised earlier. Dick mentioned one in particular. One interesting piece of this basin rulemaking is that it isn't solely relying on curtailment by priority date. It's also incorporating a reduction in duty that was agreed to by the community members who are on the rulemaking committee to only use 2.5 acre feet per acre across the board, regardless of priority date. Now that's something that I think is neat. It means that more people can keep their taps on, more junior water right holders will be able to continue pumping. It is controversial. And so I just wanted to see if this committee was in agreement that the shared reduction of duty to 2.5 acre feet per acre per year was something that this committee could support. Curious to hear your all's thoughts.
I already thought that was pretty standard for critical groundwater area because I live in one. And that's the duty that's been in effect where I live for.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, my area 2.5, we could do it, but it depends on your environment, your soil types and everything else. So I don't know that much about Harney County.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we could ask Ken, is that adequate?
Let's ask Ken. What do you think, Ken?
I agree with it. I mean, it's, I don't think we have a choice to begin with, but I think that we can live with that, and it will keep a number of folks from being shut 100% off.
Yeah, this is Eric. Yeah, I think it's great. I like it when the local people come up with solutions that they can live with and work together as a community to make it happen. So regulation doesn't have to come in and strong arm. I like to see more of it, and I hope to see more of it.
Well, it does kind of limit the crop selection too.
Sure.
Because in our area, we've turned into a lot more row crops and stuff, and it takes a lot more water. Back to the old alfalfa and grain, 2.5 is plenty. For specialty crops, it usually takes more.
But given that, you would still.
I would still say 2.5 is plenty, because
Okay.
Harney County is a lot like Klamath County. You know, high desert. They try to grow stuff they shouldn't, basically. Sooner or later it will.
That's a
freeze.
Yeah, your words, not mine.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So I think, unless anybody objects, I think we have consensus that the initial allotment and PTW based on a water right duty of 2.5 acre feet per acre is appropriate. Great. Thank you all. On a related note, while we're talking about this duty is part of the allotment determination. And one of the key decision points that received a lot of discussion during the rulemaking committee was whether the initial allotment should be based upon actual wet water use in a baseline of 2020 through 2025, or whether it should be based on paper water, the amount of paper water rights. And where the committee landed, where the department landed, what we heard earlier today, is that the initial allotment will be based on a baseline of wet water use, people who have actually been putting the water to use on ranches and farms across the landscape. So I think that is a surprisingly important point, because it determines how much reductions actually happen. Like those percentages that we saw up on the table that Tim showed us, they'd be a lot higher if we used paper water instead of wet water. So my assertion for us to discuss or debate is that the Groundwater Advisory Committee supports using wet water as a baseline to determine allocations.
Sure. Makes sense.
I agree with that.
Stephen, I agree as well.
Eric, I agree.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. If only the rack could have been as quick. Another piece of the puzzle here, just wanting to check agreement on the curtailment phase-in. We have a 30-year phase-in period, which is really, the curtailment phase-in we saw from Tim was 6-year timeframes with a front-loaded curtailment structure. So 40% of the reductions happen in the first 6-year period, then add 30% more, then add 15% more, then 10% and 5%. The idea behind that, as Tim noted, was to give people a clear ability to plan ahead about how much water is likely to be available. It also gives time to use adaptive management. If we had shorter timeframes, and adaptive management is hard because you don't get to see whether the reductions were successful or not. And it allows a glide path instead of hitting everybody with the reductions all at once. It gives people time to adapt and maybe, change crop types or switch economic revenue or things like that. So one assertion to test here is that the Groundwater Advisory Committee supports the curtailment phase-in schedule proposed.
Initially, I was against 30-year, I thought it was too long. But after the presentation of how they had taken the economics of the community into their judgment on the glide path, I can live with it.
You can live with it. I tend to lean in your direction. I also initially thought that 30 years was a long time. We heard from one of the public commenters that these declines have been happening since, for 20 years.
Which is true.
Yeah.
But I'll wager a fair amount of money that there's gonna be quite a bit of reduction before it levels out, let alone increases in the. But taking the economics into that, I'll go along with the 30 years.
I agree with 30 years. I think that, the state over allocated it and people should not pay the price for it. As little as possible.
Several of this committee won't be here to see the results, including me.
All right, folks online, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the 30-year.
Eric's in agreement.
Stephen is as well.
Okay, great. So we are buzzing through these topics. All right, I want to, let's see, there's one more and then I'm gonna pivot over to the topic that Ken suggested earlier. So one thing that we heard about and talked about a little bit is the target water level trend assessed with a median, the target water level trend for the sub areas, the success criteria that's evaluated after 30 years. That the sub areas have achieved a zero decline over a 5-year period. Does the committee agree with that target water level trend as stated in the rule? See a lot of shrugs in the room. Somebody online help us out.
This is Stephen. I do have some concerns about just relying solely on the median level to track the long-term success of reaching that groundwater trend.
I hear you, Stephen. Feel kind of the same way. I'm wondering about a median plus approach where it's the median target water level or the median of 0 and no individual wells declining below some threshold. I don't know what that threshold would be, but that's the kind of approach that might protect from outliers. Is that something like the committee can provide advice, you know, to the commission or to the department to consider that kind of approach?
Yeah, I wonder about something, well, I don't know. Yeah, I do like that idea of a median plus approach. What those bounds are seems like it would be dependent upon the individual sub areas.
I don't think we need to be on the hook for determining the quantitative bounds. So maybe, would it be fair to say that the Groundwater Advisory Committee broadly agrees with the target water level trend, but would prefer an approach that would also avoid outliers of great decline or of significant decline, something like that?
I would support that.
I can agree with that.
Okay, Justin, did you capture that?
No.
I'm trying to get succinct here. Agrees that
Is there a word limit on our recommendations or advice to the commission?
No.
Okay. Good.
Unless you want in.
I'm gonna bring a thesaurus.
So we broadly agree that the target water level trend as stated in rule is a good starting point, but we additionally recommend
Acknowledging outliers.
Yeah, right. Yep. Acknowledging and accounting for outliers. Yeah. And I know you're trying to be succinct, but is that clear enough, Justin, that it's clear that we're talking about, you know, accidentally like declaring mission accomplished when there's actually individual wells that are declining quite far? Is that clear enough or do you need more? May have substantially declined or something. All right, guys, we're giving Justin a headache. We better better keep things moving. We're near the very end of my list that I had. And it looks like we may still have time for either additional topics for us to consider and or public comment from anybody who wants to provide additional comment. So just checking in, Justin wrote this this approach here. Does that seem like something that we're all in good shape on? Yes. Okay, great. Ken, I wanted to move along capturing your the statement that you had earlier. I paraphrased it, but please do correct me or rephrase as needed. My paraphrasing is that the GWAC recommends or suggests that the commission considers voluntary agreements to increase flexibility of water use within the basin or within sub areas. But edit that, Ken. How would you frame it?
Well, essentially, that's what we're talking about. But I guess I suggest we may even consider taking it a step further, that you could actually move that water. I mean, it would be set up so that each sub basin could then move the water however they saw fit for the best use of that water within that sub basin, as long as it didn't exceed the PTW within that basin. Meaning that if that water needs to, if I don't pump, then someone else can then pump that amount that I chose not to pump. Thereby that person being able to get that crop or another crop, or perhaps they have better land or whatever, however it happens. It certainly changes the current water law, or how where you use it and how you use it. But again, it would certainly make it much more efficient in each one of these sub areas if we were allowed to do that. And a bunch of it would be through volunteer agreements. Some of it might be where the city of Burns buys my water right from me so they can use it for the city of Burns. And it's still not the same amount of pumping is going to happen within the sub area. I mean, it wouldn't here because I'm not in that sub area, but were I in it, like say the city of Crane needed it, then why wouldn't I be able to just say, hey, you can use my allocation?
Yeah, I mean, there's also kind of a middle ground where a sub basin, from a community standpoint, I mean, it's more of a utopia where they get together and, I'm not using it, so we have a permissible water reduction that we need to happen in the sub basin. They come together and figure out how they can go ahead and get that reduction by, okay, this person this year doesn't need it, but this person does need some more. But overall, the target is met, and then the community works together with, okay, Burns needs it this year, but it's essentially the community does the balancing, and then if that doesn't happen, then the department does the regulation and reductions. Get them to solve their own problem. Like you said, some farmers might not need it this year. Someone else doesn't have to reduce as much because the reduction's already at the target level. And that's good for the community as a whole. But so voluntary agreements and voluntary reductions, and having the community have some input on how to provide that solution before regulation happens, I guess, is my thoughts.
It would
Perhaps
basically
something like a sub-area co-op.
Yeah, a water district for a sub-area water district is what it would be, a sort of.
Yeah.
And then that would allow for that sub area to determine how they're going to use their total allotment of water.
And it's not changing the water rights. It's not, you pumping for someone else. So there's no water law. It's just essentially that water district coming together and saying, okay, we got a goal, let's figure out how to get to it. And then at least now the result is we're going to be in recharge and not reduction. So.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you, and one thing that I'm trying to better understand, would love to have one little follow-up on that is like, I think that's the kind of thing that voluntary agreements are for. Like, I think that's the approach to use. So
Yeah. So I was gonna ask that clarifying question too, I guess. Would you like me to try and capture the various ideas that folks on the committee have? Or I essentially wrote this out as a potential suggestion of, like, we could write out, you know, some ideas that were discussed by the committee include voluntary reductions, what I would call a transfer process, what have you. Do you all want to
Something along the
specify
lines
those,
of-
or do you want to leave it as, you know, because a voluntary agreement just in statute needs to be developed by the actual users of the aquifer, so we can recommend that, but any voluntary agreement as a tool, a statutory tool, has to be developed by the groundwater users.
I think maybe just capturing some of the ideas that Ken, Eric, Dick mentioned might be helpful, just to provide examples to the commission as the kinds of things that would be useful approaches.
Agreed.
Does that sound reasonable?
Perhaps some verbiage that said study the, or consider allowing the creation of water districts per sub area.
Okay, sorry, I'm
Something along
just
those
stalled
lines.
out on how to succinctly summarize, because I can write a paragraph, but I think.
How about this? We're limited on time and this is recorded. So Justin, would you be okay with just reviewing the recording and maybe, you know, adding the examples after the fact? Oh, Linda got them.
Okay. I would be happy or fine to do that. I'm assuming y'all are gonna need to vote on these things, so that requires trust, and I just wanna make sure that's clear.
Is that okay with committee members? Feel free to overrule me if you wanna hammer out examples right now.
No, I think listing examples is fine. The main statement is correct.
Okay, great. Then let's see, there's just one more thing, or sorry, two more things I wanted to flag, and then I want to take us to a vote on this list that we've developed. But before I get there, any other topics that we should consider discussing? We have 8 minutes left. We do want to keep some time for public comment. No, all right, people are saying please avoid. Anybody online?
No further.
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Two quick things I wanted to mention. You know, one of the public commenters asked about this committee discussing compensation for non-CREP related water rights. I think that's, you know, CREP again is a conservation reserve enhancement program that is within part of the basin, but not all of it. I want to acknowledge that comment. I don't think we have time to have that discussion right now, but it's something that perhaps we can take up and talk about in a future meeting. Is that okay with the committee if we table that for now?
I don't think we have a choice. I think it's a couple hours or an hour anyway discussion.
Agreed.
Okay, got it. Sounds good. I'm allegedly supposed to be keeping time, so seeing that time is growing short. One other similar topic was in areas that will become fallowed, how are you know, weeds or the introduction of invasive plants after fallowing that land due to curtailment, how are those handled? So similar approach. That's an important question. I hear it. We don't have the time right this instant to discuss it. So let's table that as well. This committee can continue that discussion at a future meeting. I'd like to take us to a vote. Do we have a motion from anybody to adopt this list of advice to the commission?
So move.
We have a second?
Second.
We got a second and a third. Wonderful. Let's take it to a vote. All in favor of adopting this list of advice to the commission, say aye.
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 Aye. And all opposed to sending this list as advice to the commission. Okay. Thank you all. This has been really good. I think this is one of the more detailed sets of advice to the commission that this committee has developed through rules. So I appreciate you all being willing to tackle some complicated topics. We have 5 minutes. I do want to get to our scheduled public comment period. Before I do, Linda, Justin, is there anything that I'm missing related to advice to the commission? Anything more you need from the committee?
No, I think that's good. I might ask Kelly just to confirm that as the rules coordinator.
Kelly, as rules coordinator, do you need anything else from this committee for the advice to the commission?
No, I think we got this covered. This is great. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, we're going to move to our final public comment period on the agenda. I am sorry to say that it is close to the end of our time here. I would request, please raise your hand or indicate in chat if you would like to provide public comment. I see Rob, I see Kristen. Is there anybody else in chat who would like to provide public comment? We will have to keep these relatively brief, but I appreciate y'all in advance for understanding that.
Zach, Larissa, also.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, Larissa as well, is that what you said?
Yes, Larissa as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for saying that, Tim. So we have 3 people, we have 5 minutes. Please keep your comments to 1.6 minutes long each. That's just about like 1.5 minutes. Rob, Commissioner Frank, you raise your hand first, I think, but we'll go to you, then we'll go to Larissa, and then we'll end with Kristen Shellman.
Okay, thanks. Rob Frank, Harney County Commissioner again. I really appreciate the attention and the time that the commission has taken, in particular Eric Schneider's comments about the need for metering, and we need more data. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And voluntary agreements, I wish that we would have explored those more before imposing regulation. Ken Bentz made some comments about the whole basin needs to be in the SWAMPA, but only portion should be in the critical groundwater area. I agree. The whole southern region is in a surplus. The original USGS study before the sub-basins had three regions. The southern region is in a surplus and the western region doesn't meet all the criteria. If you remove Dog Mountain and Weaver Springs, it would be fine. The minimize needless impact, if you read the study about the hydrologic economic, it says that the best thing for the economy would be to take no action, which I don't think anyone here is advocating for no action, but that is what that study says. 2.5 acre feet of duty, while I understand why we came to that, taking away a half foot of duty is a taking. We don't support taking without compensation. And so you guys have already started that discussion. I believe that if the department would have coordinated with the local governments early in the process, like this discussion, a 3-hour-long open discussion, I think we would have ended up with a less contentious rulemaking process that's at odds with our comprehensive plan. Again, I appreciate your time, and thank goodness that we had Kenny Bentz on there, or else there would have been no local knowledge. So happenstance. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank. And yes, thank you, Ken, for being part of this committee. Let's see, next up is Larissa. Please, Larissa, keep your comments to 1.5 minutes, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, thank you for letting me comment again. Larissa Singhos. I just wanted to point out for people that say they don't have enough data that they don't know. The USGS report did never ever say that the Harney Basin was one groundwater reservoir. They never referenced it. All they said is that we are hydraulically connected. You could have multiple reservoirs by their characteristics defined in an area and still be hydraulically connected. The only reason they say we're hydraulically connected is because our water all flows towards one area, but our recharges and our uses are different. If you look at the criteria, the 4 sub areas that you were discussing that are not critical by law and definition, they do not meet the Oregon statute to be designated critical. We are showing declines of 0.3 feet, 0.4, and they're putting us in a critical designation. That is not supported by Oregon statute or law. So if you want to look at the data, it is there, and it is not being supported, and it is not being used. If you look at statute and law, we are considered reasonably stable, which is how Oregon law defines water use. They have to maintain reasonably stable water levels. And if you look at 4 of these 7 sub areas, out of these 7, 4 of them meet that criteria, and they don't even come close to meeting that criteria. They modeled, for example, the Silver Creek area under no changes to water use. We use what we've been using, and they modeled a 0.1 foot a year decline. So if you look at that, to reach our permit conditions of 25 foot, it would take 300 years to reach that level. That is not critical. And to reach a critical level, which is 50 feet, it would take 600 years to reach that level. So how do you classify and how do you justify regulating people off and ruining lives and economics of a community over an inch of water that would take 600 years to even come close to being defined in Oregon law as critical? So I urge you guys to please consider that Water Resources not giving you the full picture, and they are not following their own laws and policies. We depend on this. Until about 6 months ago, we were told that not all areas were going to be regulated. It is noted in their notes that are posted on the website that while, quote, that the goal of reducing groundwater levels within portions of the groundwater reservoir where declines are most severe. So until recently, they understood that they could not regulate the whole basin based on criteria and water law.
Thank you,
So
Larissa.
what has
We are gonna have
changed?
to move along to make sure we have time for everybody to provide comment. I don't want to interrupt you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again, Larissa. I do appreciate your comments sincerely, and I hope that you also provide your comments, Larissa, and everybody else to the Water Resources Commission and through the public comment process. I'm sorry to cut you off. We do have to keep on time. I wanted to make sure we had time for Kristen Shellman to provide public comment as well, and then we will wrap the meeting.
Okay. Am I a go?
You are a go. Thank you,
Okay.
Kristen.
I did drop my comment into the chat as well, but I do feel like a portion of the conversation that was occurring around some of the subbasins, a part of that was discussed in the 512 meetings that would be important information for this committee to consider is how the transfers into those subbasins are going to be handled by the department. I don't know that I heard that in this morning's information, and so if the department could make sure to bring this committee up to speed on how they are proposing to bring that to the commission, I think that that would help this committee as they are making some of their comments. Thank you very much.
Good point, Kristen. That's something that, thank you for your public comment, everybody. And Kristen's point about transfers is something that has come up a couple of times in rulemaking. Would love to have additional information from the department to clarify that to this committee. We won't have time for that before the public comment period closes, but is that something, Justin, that maybe you can provide by email to the committee members? What just information about how transfers between sub areas might look in the future?
Why don't you let me do it real quick right here? A
minute and 30 seconds.
A minute and 30, yeah. We always evaluate transfers on a case-by-case basis and need the full information from the transfer application. Right now, as the groundwater section manager, not 512 rulemaking, my baseline starting assumption would be that different sub areas are different sources of water and that transfers wouldn't occur in between sub areas. So that's today, my understanding, again, kind of outside the 512 rulemaking. So now, hopefully that meshes with everything. And again, we'll always evaluate a transfer application on a case-by-case basis. So
Understood. Thank you. Well, one thing I want to acknowledge there, like through the public comments and through our discussion today, it's clear that this is a complicated issue. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of details in the Division 512 rules. This committee is providing its advice to the commission within the public comment period as we are required to do. However, it seems likely that there should be some follow-up discussion amongst this committee, continuing beyond the public comment period for this committee to consider some of the issues raised either through public comment or things that we simply didn't get to today. So I would just request that folks think about that. Feel free to submit. I didn't ask Justin about this in advance or Linda, but feel free to submit your ideas if you have specific topics that you want to address in future GWAC meetings to Justin or Linda. And we can continue that conversation that way. This discussion, even though we had a deadline to provide this advice before the public comment period ends, the discussion overall does not need to end and should continue with this Groundwater Advisory Committee. So just one last time before I adjourn us, just wanted to say sincere thank you, public commenters. Thank you for taking the time to be here and providing your feedback to us. Again, do not forget, if you are a public commenter, do not forget to provide your comment through the other avenues towards the commission, because your comments today just reached this committee. For committee members, really do appreciate y'all being willing to go through this long list of topics. We have provided some good advice to the commission. I'm pleased with where we landed. It's okay that we didn't have full consensus agreement on all topics. That is to be expected. So just do appreciate all y'all taking the time to engage sincerely and honestly and provide your candid takes. With that, I will adjourn our meeting today, and I will look forward to seeing y'all during the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
all right, next scheduled meeting is September 9th. So
September 9th.
Great.